All righty, good evening. This is the March 16, 2023 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The time is 6 o'clock. Our first order of business is to convene into work session. We'll reconvene around 6:30. So with that, I'll adjourn to our work session.
Just horrible.
Was he stationary or was he moving?
Well, so everyone just blocked the entire, this is on, right in front of Six Flags.
You ready?
30, good to go. Everyone was just underneath the overpass. And to avoid the hail. And he was trying to weave his way through, and this kid just came and just cratered all. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, proceed.
All right, item 2 this evening in the work session, we'll start with the roll call of commissioners that are present. I'm Commissioner Haas, Chair of the Commission. Vice Chair Portman.
Present.
Okay, Commission Member Sue Blankenship.
Present.
Cindy Bishop.
Here.
Freddie Guerra.
He's
So Freddie's
actually,
gonna be
he's gonna be on
virtual.
Zoom.
Okay.
But he, is he
I
gonna
think
be
he's
at
still
the work
trying to-
session? I think so,
He's trying
yeah.
to link up still.
Okay. Ed Moore
Present.
and Jim Walker.
Present.
All righty, so we'll review the cases. Mary, if you'll introduce staff and then review the cases for tonight.
Certainly. Mary Crombago, senior planner. We have Matt Steer, Development Services. We've got Cole Baker, with engineering. Mr. Bob Hager, city attorney. And we have Cammie and Shelby assisting us this evening.
All right.
All right. So, let's see. First item on the agenda is one item.
Okay, for the record, it also looks like Freddie's online. We see him present online. Freddie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All righty, very good, thanks.
All right, so the first item on the agenda this evening is Victory at Coppell edition. It's the final plat. If you recall, we did do, or we approved the plan development for this back in December. It went to city council. It's for the 10-lot development off of South Beltline between Hackberry and Dividend Drive. So this is the plat to plat all 10 lots, and then we'll have be constructing 4 of those lots, lots 3, 4, 9, and 10, with the detailed site plans that we approved. And then, again, the questions, it's pretty straightforward, it's just the lot, fire lanes, easements, pretty standard. Item number 6 on the agenda is the battery energy storage system at Prologis. I'll let Matt go over that one.
Yeah, so, we call this the Subaru site, and Subaru actually occupies the current facility there. It's a 300,000 square foot building with plans to expand it by 200,000 to the east. So what the battery energy storage system is it's like a little substation. What they do is they draw power down from the grid during low energy use times, and then it stores the power, and then it puts it back in the grid during peak hours. So it kind of helps things out. So where it's located on the site is the northwest corner. They are screening it with an 8-foot masonry stucco wall. So it's pretty straightforward. They're making up for the landscaping lost by adding additional green space to taking away some of their truck storage area. And I'll go through in more detail out in the big room. Any questions on that one?
It's not a backup energy facility for the Subaru dealership, is it?
No, this is separate. Yeah.
It's just connected to the grid?
Yes, sir.
But the manufacturer of the battery will be here tonight?
Yes, the actual company that's gonna do the installation.
My only concern was just safety, generally safety, you know, batteries. You hear all these horror stories of the Tesla batteries, when they catch fire, they burn super hot. You know, what's the safety record on these, that kind of stuff?
And that's what the 8-foot fence is for, right?
What's that? 10? 10, maybe 10?
All right, so the next item on the agenda is Main Street, Old Town. And I'm gonna hand these out to you, There's 2 sheets. The first sheet basically shows a comparison. The first sheet shows a comparison of what was approved previously in terms of building size, the heights of the buildings, and the different uses versus what's being proposed this evening. So essentially, it's still 7 lots, 6 buildings, 1 parking lot. Just to kind of recap, you guys did recommend approval back in November of 2022. It did go to City Council in December, and the application failed by a vote of 3 to 4 by City Council. So it's pretty similar in terms of the uses. They've added uses to the site now. So the first 2 are still built office below with residential above. And then you've got the corner building, which was previously all retail. Now it'll allow for a combination of retail and restaurant. And then the next 2 buildings, 4 and 5, will, again, has retail restaurant with a residential upstairs. And then building 6, which is the furthest south on Main Street, has even more variety of uses that they're requesting. So retail, restaurant, and medical office with residential above. In terms of parking, it's the same scenario in terms of they have a parking lot behind, they're doing on-street parking, and then the parking in the city parking lot. So in terms of how many spaces, that's all dependent upon the types of uses that are eventually go in the building. Because parking is based on use, with the most restaurant requiring the most type of amount of parking. So I think maximum would be 118 parking spaces versus previously was a maximum of 74 parking spaces. So you've got the garages, on-street, the lot 7, and then the other parking lot. Same type of conditions, asking for it to be part of the bigger Old Town Main Street project, conceptual plan, and be part of that POA. So I did receive an email today from the POA saying, you know, that they would be in favor of this. Obviously, it has to go through a formal vote, but that they were hoping that this becomes part of their, or would be a part of their POA. In terms of the buildings, the same elevations, so the buildings are going to look the same. The biggest differences are the heights. So building 1, which is one of the proposed office buildings on Bethel, the one furthest west, it actually went up 2 feet. Everything else is the same until you get to building 6, actually went down 4 feet. But colors, trims, everything else pretty much the same.
Can we ask a question now, or should we wait till you're done? A height question.
Sure, go ahead.
I want to speak out of turn.
No.
Do you know how the height of building 1 compares to the existing building next to it to the west?
Building 1?
Yeah, building 1, which is a little bit taller now. I'm just curious, do you know, is that a lot taller than the existing building next to it? With an idea? Not the ones that are proposed, the existing
Yeah.
building.
Yeah, those are
that's-
single story, and this is,
Right.
Benefits of steel.
Right,
Yeah.
but it has almost a false second
Yeah.
story thing.
Yeah.
I can look it up.
Matt's gonna look it
Oh,
up,
thank you.
so we'll
Okay,
keep going,
yes.
because that's the one building I don't have Like I know George's Coffee Shop is about 34 and a half. Lifestream, which is right beside Building 6, is 30 and a half. Let's see, Frost is about 31 and a half.
Okay.
So, you know, it's in the range of the ones, you know, Main Street and interior. The one that you specifically asked about, I don't know. I'm sorry. So let's see here. So pretty much the slides are what you've already seen. Shouldn't be really anything too new. I'm going to talk about the Old Town Master Plan and kind of what the vision was. We did send out responses or mailings, and we received 8 in favor within the 200 feet, and another 2 in favor that are outside of the 800 feet. I didn't receive any opposition to this mail out. In terms of the recommendations, pretty much everything that we saw with this go around.
Simple majority.
Okay?
Simple majority to approve.
Correct. Simple majority to approve, and this would go to City Council for final determination.
Mary?
Yes, sir.
So with the changes, is there a single variance being requested with respect to any of our current ordinances?
It's the same PD conditions that were previously requested. So nothing new, like, you know, lot 7, would be just a parking lot. So all the PD conditions are
Okay,
the same.
thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Now we move to item 8, which is so this will be a regular hearing. This is not a public hearing. And this is a separate item. This is for consideration of demolition permit for 509 West Coppell. So it's associated with the item before it, where they're proposing the 6 buildings in the parking lot. But the demolition permit is a separate submission. So regardless of what happens with the PD zoning, they're still requesting a demolition permit.
So, we've never gotten a demolition permit here before, since I've been on the board.
Yeah.
And we've had demolitions in the city before. Why is this one coming from planning and zoning?
So if it's in the historic district, it's supposed to go before planning, zoning, and city council.
Okay, so only in the historic district do demo permits come to us.
Yes. It's just the way it's written in
Okay.
the ordinance.
And the demolition permit's not contingent on denial of, approval of the preceding one? They're just treat them
They're
entirely separate?
independent items. So if that one gets approved, it's one thing. If it gets denied, they can still ask for a demolition permit. Because at some point, if he wants to, clear the site for redevelopment, is what he's looking to do.
When you had this item last time, you had the zoning case, but you did not have an application for a demolition permit. So they've now included that with their submission. And they've indicated to the staff that they wanted the building taken down, whether or not the zoning passes or not.
The ability to take.
The ability to take it down.
Yeah.
So I presume their offer is off the table with some funds, if there's a potential relocation?
I'm not aware of that. I'm
You
not
can
aware.
ask the applicant.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the submission to indicate that they would do anything else other than demo the building.
But when you use the word submission, this is a different application than the zoning.
Yes.
Okay. We used it as one term, so I was just curious. You called it in the submission.
Right, submission for, they have a submission to request a demolition permit.
Okay. That's separate
A
from.
separate item.
Separate item.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was clear.
Okay, to answer Cindy's question,
Yes.
the height question is 32 feet 4 inches high to the top of the,
Yeah.
and what it is they've got a gable on that building, that probably a false gable, right?
Yeah.
But it does go up to 32 feet 4 inches high, sorry.
32.4.
32, thank you. Great, thanks, Matt.
And what's the height of the lot, building one then?
29 feet, 6 inches.
Yes,
According to the sheet.
so this is the building.
The one next door.
Yeah.
I forget what the business name is, but yeah, the one next door.
Okay. Continue. Sorry about the interruption.
Okay, so, yeah, so with the demolition, that's just independent of whatever happens.
Any questions on demolition?
So procedurally, let's say
Mhm.
hypothetically, the case before it passes, but this one goes down, this fails. What happens?
Well, it'll go to city council,
Okay,
because you're a recommending body, so
okay.
even with the zoning, you're a recommending body. The zoning, they can appeal it to go to city council. But the demolition permit will move forward. All right, item 9. So, so this will be a public hearing. What we're looking to do is a special use permit, amendments to include lodging houses. And this will also include short-term rentals. So currently, short-term rentals live outside of the zoning ordinance. They have their own ordinance, their own set of regulations, their own permit, and everything like that. STRs have been kind of very hot topic throughout the Metroplex. And so beginning in 2018, we started adding an STR ordinance. And it's been amended probably annually or every 6 months. We have a company that, you know, checks to make sure how many STRs we have in the city. If you know, there's a permit they have to apply for, but the state regulations have kind of hampered our rules and regulations. So what we're looking to do is to bring that into the zoning ordinance, and this does a couple of things. One, currently, if you apply for an STR, if you get an STR, your neighbors find out after the fact. We send a letter saying, hey, there's someone in, you know, within, if it's 100, 200 feet, that has an STR. But with this process, it brings, everyone has a seat at the table. So it's just like our zoning cases, right, because it's a zoning category. We send out letters to property owners within 200, 800 feet. They have an opportunity to come and do a public hearing, both at P&Z and City Council, and to actually let you and let council know, hey, I'm for this, I'm against this, what have you. So this allows us more discretion as well. Because everything's done on a case-by-case basis. And so basically, you know, maybe in some parts of the city, maybe you live there and you're fine with having an STR next to you. You may not be fine having an STR, but at least it gives you a voice.
Freddie, question.
Freddie?
Yes.
Fire away, Freddie.
Hey, sorry, the question I have is that notification that goes to the surrounding properties, is it similar to what we're sending now, or is it gonna be different so that others can understand there's a difference of what's gonna happen within that area?
It's exactly the same. So this is the 200 and 800 that we do with all our zoning notifications.
Thank you.
Okay,
So I have a couple questions.
yeah.
How many STR applications do we have in the city already?
So we have about a dozen?
We have, currently we have 11, which is SDR, but we almost answers on daily basis questions about SDR.
Okay. Because with this process, that means all STRs have to come to P and Z to get for approval. So I just, if it was 1,000, requests, then, I don't know that that's a good use of our time.
The real problem is we have probably more than we can account for. That's another issue.
So everyone's gonna have to come through.
Even the old ones, would they be grandfathered under the old ordinance, or do
When
they
the
have to?
permit expires, then they'll have to come in. They have an annual permit. Once the permit expires, then the use is not authorized, so they would have to come and then get a SUP.
Got it. So we believe there's more than 11 in the city?
We suspect.
There's 11 permitted,
How,
let's put it that way.
how would we not know? I mean, aren't there requirements to have an STR?
It's like you don't know who all the speakers are until they get caught.
Yeah, so we have a third party that monitor all SDRs in the city, but as we speak, people who wishes to use SDR are becoming very creative and finding loopholes in our ordinance. So they don't have to come and register for a permit. So it's true that we have a very good SDR process in place today, but we are evolving faster than our ability to monitor them. Even the companies that we hire could every day be adding new technology to their platform in order to monitor more. But even today, Mindy and I talked about an incident where we believe in SDR, but we find a loophole in the system.
Yeah, there was a homeowners association president that learned about one in his association that was from a realtor. And they were advertising a 3-bedroom, 3-bath on Verbo, a sleeping 28.
Oh,
So,
Holy cow.
but this would put limits on the number of persons and the,
We could write our own.
Yeah, part of the reason that we are going this route, it gives us an opportunity to craft regulations that fit the house and fit the neighborhood. Is this use, it generally would be compatible if they did this, that, and the other, Some properties are more challenged with parking, some are closer to each other as far as what kind of outdoor activities because of the density of the neighborhood. So there's all those things that play into it, like you do any SUP, you would put conditions on it to make it as compatible as possible. If it wasn't compatible, then you would deny the SUP. So it gives us an opportunity to craft specific regulations to meet the neighborhood and to meet the house and the size of the house, one of which is how many people can stay there,
number of cars that can
number
park
of
there.
cars can park there, activities that go on there, no commercial. I've seen STRs used to rent basically the pool, not here, and they have
There's an
an
app.
outdoor
There's an
party.
app.
There's an app for that, but
Swim.
Swimmingly or something it's called, but they have an event there. And then I've got caterers that find SDRs to have events for their clients. So they're not really they're party venues, they're not really STRs.
So this will kind of group that in as well, because like Bob was saying, there's pools, people renting out garage spaces, people renting out, accessory structures, all kinds of things
Yeah,
that.
we had one in town where they were using an STR regulation, basically having I won't say a flea market, but garage sale every weekend. They would bring wares into the garage, store them, and then the weekend they would have, someone would come in and conduct a sale. And it wasn't really for the purposes of vacation home for a week or something. It was really a ruse to have a commercial enterprise in a residential neighborhood, which we didn't think would be appropriate.
So you mentioned the ability to craft language, so this is still a lot of things yet to be determined?
A a lot of it's already set in place because we're just gonna kind of transition. The idea is to put it in the zoning ordinance and kind of use the ordinance for the STRs that's already there, but just this kind of puts more teeth into it.
So this is really just another tool in order for us to engage our residents with what's going on in their neighborhood. So we're basically just engaging them. There's an STR coming to your neighborhood. If you agree or disagree, come out and let us know what we think. And based on what we think, we might have to be able to craft some condition based on that specific neighborhood. So we already have language for STR, but we want to be able to be more specific, as Bob said, craft condition based on that plot and the challenges that that exact address has.
And just so you know, there's a lot of things that get involved in this. There's corporate housing, where a corporation will actually buy a house, and so they have a lot of people come into town. And because of your proximity to national headquarters at Cypress Waters now, this is possibly another use where they would come in and buy a house instead of putting their executives or people that are coming in, say 7-Eleven, they would put them in a house in lieu of putting them in a hotel. So, those are things that we think that the neighbors need to know about to protect the integrity of the residential neighborhood.
But would that situation be covered in
It's
this?
a lodging house, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the
That's why we
lodging-
wanted to broaden the definition, because there's new products and variations of that products. It's not traditional STR, so we wanted to call them all lodging houses. And then that way we'd get to see what they are, if it's a bed and breakfast, if it's an STR, if it's corporate housing, because then we can craft the regulations to, if we want to allow it, in order to protect the neighborhood.
So building
There
up
does- Go ahead.
Cindy's question, we're gonna perhaps see an influx in
You might be
STR
busy.
cases, and then we make a recommendation, and council's gonna ultimately see an increase. Okay.
Yeah, but this gives, the neighbors a voice
Yeah.
ahead of time versus, just wanting to complain after. It's like you have an opportunity to come at the forefront and say, I'm in favor, not in favor.
If one of the things, I know you can appreciate this, Mr. Walker can appreciate this too, we have a different review process if it's zoning at the courthouse than we do if it's a regulation. We've got more discretion, gives us more control.
Why wouldn't we just exclude it within a residential area as incompatible as a commercial operation? In the same way we wouldn't let,
The garage
Hilton
sale.
show up
They don't-
and
they don't
operate,
want us.
buy 5 houses and operate a hotel in the same area.
There's people with black roads said I couldn't. There's court cases that indicate an exclusion is not appropriate. I agree with you.
Well, but like Arlington is excluding it with all with respect to their entertainment district.
We don't have an entertainment district. I get your point, but right now, we're not getting favorable rulings out of the court system. That's why,
We had the same
as a
talks,
matter of fact,
same
they
discussions.
upheld that based on zoning, and we don't have a zoning ordinance. That's why I'm recommending we go to zoning.
No, I
because
think it's
we
good.
got marks.
Do we have anything in there about, because, homeowners associations can also preclude short-term rentals within the footprint of the association if they have that in their
Yeah.
bylaws.
If it's in the bylaws, we have a number of neighborhoods that don't, and that's where we're seeing the proliferation. So then you're gonna force them on to certain neighborhoods that are older.
Or don't have an HOA,
HOAs.
yeah, like mine.
Yeah.
So does
There's
this
even-
include BTRs or just
What's a
the build-to-rent communities? Hugely popular right now in
We don't
Texas.
have those here.
Yet, you don't know that you don't have those.
Yeah,
You can-
probably,
yeah.
property value probably precludes that
Okay.
right
Because
now.
there's
It
a
may
difference
be-
between long-term rental,
Mhm.
like, you rent a house for a year, 6
Mhm.
months, however. This is more of a 30-day or less.
Okay.
Yeah,
The BTRs are coming.
But in the case of like corporate housing though, how would corporate housing fall into that? Because it's not really a rental.
Well, it's still, okay, so the term that the way we're using it is that it would include bed and breakfast, boarding house or hostels, vacation home, STRs, and corporate housing. So when you
We
come
just brought the
forward,
definition. That's why we got away from STR, we went to lodging house.
Okay.
In Dallas, they're proposing, in Fort Worth, proposing to exclude them from residential districts. We think that that's not, they backed off of that. Plano has something, I believe, it's gonna be voted on tonight,
Yeah,
that very thing.
yeah.
And,
Random gunfire will get you motivated.
yeah,
Any gunfire?
I would rather, here's what I'll say to you. The council is not inclined at this time to have an absolute ban.
Bob, I think it's important, what we have is we want to balance the need of the property owners to rent their homes if they wish, but also maintain the integrity of the neighborhood. And that's why we have this process to engage the neighbors, like telling them, but at the same time, we understand there's right of the homeowners to use their homes as they wish. So we're not telling them no, but with the zoning process, we allowing the resident just to have a voice as well.
Yeah, but I don't think that's accurate, though. I don't think I could operate my home as a large dog boarding facility,
Or a restaurant.
or a coal forge, a metallurgy lab, or something like that. I mean, there's all sorts of commercial operations that I can't say, well, I can do what I want with my property if it's in a residential area, right? So if you're operating a hotel or motel, it's the same thing. It's just another
Yes.
commercial operation.
Yes, I agree, I agree with you, the court has heretofore not agreed if it's a regulation. That's why I think if we have the zoning argument, we can make that argument a lot better.
Because, I mean, that Hignell-Stark opinion last August, I mean, they destroyed the takings argument, so that argument's dead.
Yes.
So all it really comes, and the only reason they overturned the New Orleans ordinance was because it had a homestead exemption requirement for, you had to,
Equal protection argument.
right, so it violated interstate commerce.
Right,
But we had that too, but then we already amended to get rid of that, right?
yes.
Okay, so this is the amendment of the amendment we've already had to address.
This is brand new, so we're moving, we took care of the north.
Cool,
So
okay.
what about a longer term rental, like an annual rental? So it would not fall into this?
No, that, we have an ordinance for that too. We have,
But it's specifically the 30 days?
it's a registration ordinance.
And that would be a long-term rental,
Yeah.
so.
And then how, I'm thinking ahead here, in terms of how can we have consistency across different cases where one case is you have more community participation, the next case you necessarily don't, you know, or vice versa, where maybe the first you don't, and then all of a sudden you do, and it's bringing up topics that are, you know, are previously approved. And so I'm just thinking through there could be a lot of these, and then two, how to have some sort of guidelines going in terms of, you know, what is potentially appropriate or not, versus every case being.
They won't all be the same. The law tells us that each piece of property is unique, and there's no other piece of property like it. The neighborhoods may be similar. A lot of it will have to do with compatibility of the neighborhood, and the voices of the community are gonna have an influence. Just because you have an SF7 on the west side of town doesn't mean that same SF7 is the same neighborhood on the east side of town. And so it's an ad hoc decision rooted hopefully in objective criteria that's brought before you based on the neighbors, the house, where it's located on a through street, and what's already there. One of the things that I think we need to address through this is I don't want 6 of them on one street, because now you get a hotel district.
Well, you also have the ability to sell your house if you're next to all that,
Yeah.
so.
I-
Why wouldn't we just, maybe treat all hotels the same with respect to the number of parking spaces in relation to the square footage of the rooms, or why wouldn't we just do that across the board objectively? You have to have a certain amount of parking spaces per square footage of rental space.
so,
You have that
Right,
already if it's
yeah.
commercial.
Well,
well,
and this would be commercial.
the thing is, with a residential, you can put however many parking requirements you want. They can park on the driveway, but then they'll park on the street, because it's public parking.
But the
It's a
facility
public street.
itself wouldn't be compliant if it didn't have the requisite number of parking spaces on the
site.
property,
On
on
site.
site.
Right.
We wouldn't let a hotel say, well, you know, we're next to the Hilton, so they can just use that parking spot.
Right.
But when they built the house and platted it, it had the minimum required parking as part of the build.
Well,
Because it was a
if-
residential build.
If, for example, if you have a house and you were to turn it into an STR and you would rent it, lease it, or license it for a week to a family, they probably have 1 or 2 cars and they'll fit within there. If you rent it out for the weekend and 20 people stay there, that's where you guys have to say, this is not the place for 20 people to stay in that facility. So if you do have an STR, then maximum,
But that won't show up until after the fact. You know, someone's coming in and they're saying, oh yeah, we want to have an STR.
you know, but if I got chronic problems, what can I do with a special use permit that I otherwise couldn't do? That's revoke it. So if you misbehave, it gives me a tool that we
That's good.
can
That's good.
use to keep that, yeah. It's just like, you put speed limit, but there's still gonna be people that go past the speed, so what happens to them? They get prosecuted.
Well, if we-
Unfortunately, and if you do it enough times, the state will take your license away from you.
All right, guys.
Yeah, go ahead, big guy.
Do we have, we could probably save questions for the,
Yeah.
up there.
I have a bevy of them.
Me too, I better write them down.
Look, she was talking about this. Buildings.
That's it.
Anything else? You want to review the council
We have several under
items
construction
from the last session?
And you either plat them
Well,
as a
so
single
Coppell
family
is Starbucks,
residential
but
and
The
it's just
council
a
meeting is
built-in
actually.
community, or it's platted on a single
Oh,
lot.
okay.
Because
Yeah.
spring break, they.
And
Oh,
Spring
that's
break.
back,
an
okay.
apartment
Okay.
complex.
So
So is it like-
funds.
Yeah.
Build
Any
this-
other questions of staff before we head out?
For the people who get to pick up.
No.
All right, so,
No, it's just a rental.
quick break before we start?
100% rental.
All right, so the time is 6:37, we'll adjourn the work session, and we'll reconvene general session at about 6:45. Okay.
Thank you.
All righty, the time is 6:45, and the Planning and Zoning Commission is now reconvening into regular session. All members of the commission are present, including Commissioner Guerra, who is online virtually. Item 3 on the agenda is citizens' appearance. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on an item that's not on the agenda tonight? As I look out into the audience, seeing none. Okay, we'll move on to, I guess I should ask Mary, were there any written comments for citizens' appearance? Okay, moving on. All right, item 4 this evening, approval of our February 16th, 2023 meeting. Any comments, or is there a motion by the commission?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that the minutes of our last meeting be approved as written.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Portman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Blankenship. Cammie, would you call the roll, please?
Please respond by saying aye or nay as I call your name. Commissioner Blankenship.
Aye.
Commissioner Guerra.
Aye.
Vice Chair Portman.
Aye.
Chairman Haas.
Aye.
Commissioner Maurer.
Aye.
Commissioner Walker.
Aye.
And Commissioner Bishop.
Aye.
All approved, none opposed, motion carries.
Okay, item 5 on the agenda is Victory at Coppell Edition. That's lots 1 through 10, Block A, a final plat. This is to consider approval of Victory at Coppell Edition, lots 1 through 10, Block A, final plat. A final plat to create 10 commercial lots and associated easements and fire lane configuration on 16.766 acres of property located on the east side of South Beltline Road between Dividend Drive and Hackberry Road at the request of Beltline Properties, being represented by Kirkman Engineering. We have a staff presentation by Ms. Mary Perone Boswell. Mary?
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Item 5 is a final plat for Victory at Coppell. This is a 16.766 acre tract which borders Coppell and the city of Dallas. They will have shared utilities. We did approve a PD for this a few months ago. And let's see, the proposed uses for this site, there's several professional and medical offices, restaurants and quick serve restaurants, daycare and retail as well on the lots here. So I apologize, the two images are the north arrow points to the right direction. Just the pictures are a little bit flipped. So they have 10 proposed lots. There will be a mutual access, drainage, and fire lanes. A variable width sidewalk easement is proposed. And again, this is for Victory at Coppell. We did approve detailed site plans for lots 3, 4, 9, and 10. And so they need to plat the lots and provide a POA document before they can, and file this plat before they can begin construction. So staff is recommending approval of Victory at Coppell Edition, lots 1 through 10, Block A, final plat, subject to the following conditions. 1, that additional comments may be generated upon detailed engineering permit reviews, and 2, that a POA will be required prior to filing the final plat. That is the end of my presentation.
Very good. Thank you, Mary. Any questions of staff by the commission? Any discussion by the commission?
Mary, did you review HOA documents for this property?
So we're still waiting for the POA documents, so they won't be able to file it until we have those documents in hand.
I have a quick question. Are you going to be, is the requirement for the POA to be filed before we file the final plat? Or is it just reviewed and submitted to the city?
So we haven't received it yet, so we need to at least have it and approve it before they can move forward with filing. And that's contingent on, engineering and some other things that they're working out right now.
So what's the trigger to getting it filed? I mean, they can submit it to you, you can review it, we can approve it, but when does it get filed, if ever?
It should get filed concurrently with the
Okay.
plat. So I just need to figure out if there's, sometimes it refers to one thing, so you have to file something before you can do that.
Mhm.
So there's a timing issue there.
Okay. I just wanted to know what the trigger is to get it filed.
Yeah.
There's no hammer.
Well, they won't be getting any permits till they,
Got it, okay.
yeah.
There's the hammer, thank you.
There's the hammer, yes.
Any other questions of staff? Any final discussion on the item? Is there a motion? Before we go to a motion, Commissioner Guerra, do you have any questions of staff on this?
I do not.
Okay. All righty. Is there a motion on the item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve Victory at Coppell Addition Lots 1-10 Block A, final plat, subject to the staff conditions.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Portman. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Blankenship. Cammie, would you call the roll, please?
Please respond by saying aye or nay as I call your name. Commissioner Blankenship.
Aye.
Commissioner Guerra.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Portman.
Aye.
Chairman Haas.
Aye.
Commissioner Mauer.
Aye.
Commissioner Walker.
Aye.
And Commissioner Bishop.
Aye.
All approved, none opposed, motion carries.
Okay, very good. Item 6 on the agenda, public hearing, PD-272R2R2-LI, battery energy storage system at Prologis Park 121, Lot 4R, Block A, a zoning change request from Plan Development 272 Revision number 2, revised light industrial to Plan Development 272 Revision number 2, revised number 2, light industrial, to attach detailed site plan to allow the addition of a 9.9 megawatt battery energy storage system contained within a 3,243 square foot equipment area to the existing 25.72 acre site that has an existing 300,360 square foot office/warehouse building with a future proposed expansion of 200,240 square feet located on the east side of North Freeport Parkway, approximately 800 feet south of State Highway 121, on the west side of North Coppell Road at the request of Prologis and being represented by Esteban Ice of Ravenvolt, Inc. We have a staff presentation with Staff Member Matt Steer. Matt?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good evening. This site is part of a 110-acre development that was approved in July 2014, north of Sandy Lake and east of North Freeport Parkway. We call this the Subaru site that has an existing 300,000 square foot building with a 200,000 square foot future addition that has not yet been constructed. The request before you this evening is to amend the current zoning to allow for the addition of a 9.9 megawatt battery energy storage system to the northwest corner of the lot shown in yellow. The proposed use of the system is to tie in with the utility grid and enable energy storage during times of low demand. This would be released back to the grid when customers need the power the most. The proposed equipment area on site is 3,243 square feet, and the equipment is proposed to be placed on concrete pads and screened with an 8-foot stucco wall painted to match the building. A 15-foot drainage easement bisects the proposed easement area. No equipment will be allowed to be placed within it, and there's a sliding gate proposed on the western side and a swinging gate on the east side to serve as access for both the city and the applicant. The wall does encroach into the 10-foot perimeter landscaping by 5 feet, which will require a PD condition to be added to the ordinance. Staff is comfortable with this as the equipment is effectively screened with the proposed wall. There are 23 eastern red cedars proposed to be replaced with 37 Nellie R. Stevens, and the Shemard red oaks along that northern boundary will remain unaffected. Currently, without the equipment pad, the landscape area of the entire lot is approximately 1,650 square feet in surplus. By adding 3,243 square feet of equipment area, they need to add 1,600 square feet of additional green space to offset that. So they've proposed to do that by taking away 2 of their truck trailer spaces. Then they're proposing to transplant a live oak into that green space. Elevations of the 8-foot screening wall. It does have columns or decorative columns every 30 feet, and it does have gates at each of the sides. The eastern gate is a swing gate, and the western gate is a sliding gate. We sent out 20 notices within 200 feet, 120 within 800 feet. Didn't receive any response in favor or opposition of this request. Staff is recommending approval of PD 272R2R2 LI, Battery Energy Storage System at Prologis Park 121, subject to the following conditions. 1, the screening wall will be allowed the 5-foot encroachment into the required 10-foot perimeter landscaping setback on the north side of the property. 2, include impervious area total in the site data table. 3, include the column detail on the wall details. 4, correct zoning information on the architectural site plan. 5, change note on landscape plan referring to crushed utility gravel 3-inch depth with weed barrier fabric to common Bermuda grass and show the relocation of the existing live oak into the new green area east of the equipment area. 6, update the landscape area tabulations and ensure the 1,600 square foot is sufficient landscape area to make up the area deficiencies. I know that's a lot of conditions to add that are very technical in nature, but the applicants had to work with 3 different entities in order to get these changes made to their plans. So I'm confident that they can do so prior to council. That concludes my presentation. We do have the applicant in the audience, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you, Matt. Any questions of staff by the commission? Sue?
So the drainage easement that runs through the middle, is there an existing pipe in there or is it surface drain?
I'll let Cole Baker.
There is a pipe there.
Cole,
so
need
it's-
you to come down?
There is the pipe within there, according to Cole Baker.
Okay, so it's not surface drain? It's not used as surface drainage?
No,
at all?
there's
Just-
underground drainage in there.
Okay. That was it.
While he's down here, any other questions that involves Public Works or? All right. We reserve the right to bring you back. All right. Any other questions of staff by the commission? Go ahead, Ed.
Is there any concern with the screening wall? Is there, from a protection standpoint, do we have any thinking around including bollards or anything that would prevent, a car or truck from driving through into the battery facility? And then 2, is there anything in the code that limits the amount of batteries that can be housed in one place or in one lot?
Well, so this area is the maximum area that they can, have based on the landscaping requirements and the needs of the lot. In terms of maximum number of batteries per area, I'm not sure. This is the proposal that they brought in before us. In terms of bollards adjacent to the wall, that is a good idea for potentially the closest areas. There is eastern red cedars along this end, and then there's trees and other things to protect it on this end. But possibly maybe on the corners, I see that as a good addition. And we can ask the applicant to include that, if that's included in your recommendation.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, is the applicant here to present the case? If I could get your name and address for the record?
Brandon Lackey with Ravenbolt, Wichita, Kansas, 2837 North Teton Court.
Are you in agreement with the conditions as presented by staff?
We are in agreement with the conditions.
Okay, got some follow-on questions. So this is going to be the first of its kind here in Coppell, and I don't know anything about this kind of system. What is the safety record for this kind of operation? And the reason I'm asking is, you hear all these stories of when the Tesla cars, when those batteries explode, they run super hot, and then there's a fire response issue because it's so hot, they just have to let them basically burn. If this thing were to catch fire, whatever, what would be the implications? But I guess first is, what's the safety record on the proposal there?
We have not seen any issues with these. I will note a couple things since there is not as familiar. The batteries inside the cabinets, you'll see the smaller refrigerator-looking squares. Those are called the battery cabinets. Inside the battery cabinets, there's modules, which are about 2 foot by 2 foot by 6 inches, and then inside those modules, there's cells. Those cells about the size of a AA battery, right? So all of these units are tested to UL standards by a third-party testing lab. The cells that go into stationary battery systems are a different chemistry than what's used in on-road vehicles. On-road vehicles are a lot more cognizant of weight. For stationary battery systems, we're not as concerned about weight, more concerned about safety. So there is a different chemistry design. Even though they're often both called lithium-ion, they do have a different chemistry design. The UL 9540A, which these are tested to by an independent third-party lab, specifically test for thermal propagation. And to do that, they basically heat up a cell and see how much it propagates. Back when I said each cabinet has modules, these were tested so that the thermal propagation did not actually leave the modules themselves, right? So then within a cabinet, you have multiple modules, right? So that does not, with these units, the heat or the thermal discharge does not propagate to other modules. Additionally, as a layer of safety, right, each cabinet has an internal fire suppression system, right, as a second layer of safety. So the overall site is designed to NFPA 855, and we have a third-party fire protection engineer that validates our drawings, and then, like I said, third-party UL testing lab that actually tests the equipment that's going in there.
How often are those batteries then tested? Is there a routine where they're checked to ensure there's nothing?
There are live analytics, right? And so there are actually live temperature monitoring and reading.
Okay.
And there goes back to the scheduling entity and the owner for live updates and for being able to remotely control and take those offline if needed, right? Okay. So it's a live process.
I saw a reference I was looking at the screening walls, the 8 foot, and there's going to be some protrusion by a couple of feet. What's a skid?
So the skids are what's called the power conversion skid. That's what takes the DC energy of the battery and converts it to AC energy that the grid uses. It's also worth noting that these battery systems, ERCOT changed their regulations here a couple of years ago after the storms, and to allow installations like this and fast track the process because they felt that was a need to support the grid. So this battery installation supports not just our customer, but supports the customers in that area as it ties directly to the substation. Okay. So it supports the local community there, that ERCOT node in particular.
Thank you. Other questions of the applicant? Sue?
So you said it supports your customer. Who is your customer?
Prologis will be the owner of the battery storage system.
Now, and then is there any other associated businesses when you put these in place that are kind of associated with you, like a data mining company or?
No, these are directly for energy storage. So there's no other data mining associated with these.
Okay. Thank you.
So the customer is the sale of the excess energy when needed. It's only to a certain folks, or is it to the general public?
It sells to the grid through
Okay.
ERCOT.
Gotcha.
So that's all through a qualified scheduling entity in ERCOT, right? Okay. But the way ERCOT's divided up into nodes, the pricing for energy rates is divided up into nodes. This will directly support this node and the local customers that are tied to that node.
Jim, I think, Jim, you had a question?
Yeah, just a couple. So with respect to this type of energy storage system, how many of these have y'all built within the ERCOT footprint?
Ravenvolt in particular has built hundreds of megawatts of generation, less than the battery storage side because it's newer. our suppliers and partners in this FlexGen has built, I think, 15 or so in the Texas ERCOT market of this size throughout Texas.
Okay, but how many have y'all built?
We haven't, this will be our first installation. We have a number of these in varying phases of the construction process.
And how many, what's the prior experience that Prologis has with maintaining and monitoring and operating an energy storage system like this?
I can't speak to energy storage systems. I believe that they are one of the second largest PV. Prologis has a large commitment to renewable energies. They have a very robust photovoltaic install base throughout their.
Yes, sir.
And this is Jacob Morgan with Prologis. I can add some background on that. But yeah, we have over 450 megawatts of rooftop solar. We're actually the second largest rooftop solar developer in the U.S. And have the second most under management. And then I personally came from Broadreach Power. I've built tens of these in the Texas market, up and around Houston and Dallas areas. And I've been doing energy storage development and projects the last 6 years.
Right, but I mean, photovoltaic systems don't have any lithium-ion batteries in them, do they?
They do not, no, but I have been doing energy storage projects. I've developed energy storage projects around throughout ERCOT. At Broadreach, we had over 350 megawatts under management at Broadreach, and I lead the development for all of our energy storage business.
Okay, looking at y'all's letter, back to Ravenvolt. So when you talk about peak shifting, do you really mean peak shaving? Is that what you're actually talking about?
So peak shaving would be generation of electricity. Batteries don't generate electricity,
Right.
So we are only able to shift the load. So we can't actually take.
We're charging energy from the middle of the day when solar and when resources on the grid, and then dispatching those into the evening times when renewables go offline.
Okay. So how many of these exist in ERCOT then, right now?
I don't know the exact number.
I mean, do you know how long we've had energy storage?
There's a few gigawatts in ERCOT.
Not in lithium-ion storage systems.
Of lithium-ion. Yeah, of lithium-ion battery systems.
Okay. So how many of these units exist in ERCOT? I'm sorry, I don't understand your answer. How many of these units have been built and now provide dispatchable power within the ERCOT footprint?
There's over 100 battery systems. These, this is the smaller end, so this is a 10 megawatt, but there's 300, 400, 500 megawatt batteries that are now online in ERCOT.
Okay. Now, with respect to the standards that these are being built according to, what's the containment system, the battery cabinet made of?
Metal.
How thick? What kind of metal?
I can get that information. It would just be a traditional metal outdoor enclosure.
What are the different components within? What are they made of? The containment systems of the cells?
Metal as well. The modules, all the cells are contained in a metal module and contained in a metal unit enclosure.
And how close is each battery cabinet to the other?
They're directly adjacent to each other. But the UL testing standards show that this thermal runaway does not propagate outside the module, and therefore it does not also propagate outside the cabinet, the unit level.
So how does your system, the design of the containment structures, differ from what happened in Surprise, Arizona? Are you familiar with the 2019 energy storage system fire in Surprise, Arizona?
I believe that was an indoor system.
Okay.
Is that correct?
I think you're right.
Okay. I can't speak exactly to that system,
okay.
But I do believe it was an indoor system, whereas ours is an outdoor system.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's new guidelines. So those batteries didn't have fire suppression systems. APS, that was in the APS market with Fluence battery, and yeah, there's there's new, and Arizona is now adopting energy storage now that we've gone through the safety and fire suppression requirements, and so everyone's now abiding by the new requirements to make something happen that happened in Arizona not happen other places.
Well, describe your the internal fire suppression system within each cabinet. There's no information about that in here.
I can get that in more detail. It's an aerosol system.
Is it dry chemical?
I don't believe it's dry. I think it's an aerosol-based system.
Okay.
Is what it's been described as.
Okay, and there's a port on the top of each cabinet to allow the fire department to access it?
There's a port on the top of each cabinet if the fire department were to decide to flood it with water. That's what the port would be used for.
What's the size of the port?
I can get that information.
Well, looking at the design and construction of this facility, how would the fire truck access any particular battery cabinet with a fire hose?
They could enter through one of the two gates on either end of the site.
So they'd pull the fire truck up against a lithium-ion battery fire?
Say that one more time, I apologize.
They'd pull the fire truck up against a battery cabinet filled with lithium-ion batteries that's having thermal runaway and use a hose to fill it with water?
I can't speak exactly to that. So we, as part of this, will be designed to NFPA 855. And like I said, we have a third-party fire protection engineer who sits on the NFPA committees doing our design reviews.
Yeah, I saw a reference to that, but 855 just controls the storage of lithium-ion batteries, right? I mean, nothing more than that.
No, I don't. I believe it's more inclusive than that.
Okay. Let me see. I think that might be it.
Jim, hang on, have a second. Matt?
Commissioner Walker,
Yes, sir.
they will be required to pull a fire protection permit through our fire department.
Okay.
So we do have the opportunity to review it and make sure it meets all the codes.
I'm concerned about the safety of our firefighters. If you've got a channel going through the middle of those two battery cabinets and a port on each battery cabinet, that the fire suppression is supposed to utilize a hose to fill the cabinet with water, but you're suggesting that you've got guys walking right up against a lithium-ion battery cabinet that's ostensibly in thermal runaway with a fire hose. That doesn't sound like that's really going to happen. I can't imagine we'd let our firefighters do that.
So as part of the UL 9540A test procedures, they test for thermal runaway. There's 3 layers before that fire port would potentially be used. So the first layer is the module level, right? And the system that we are installing has been tested to not exceed the thermal limits and propagate to the other modules within that cabinet, right?
Okay.
And then again, if that cabinet, if for some reason that failed, the modules would not propagate to the other units beside it.
And
there's active management. So if for example, the temperatures reach a certain threshold, it would then dispatch the system to turn off, and it would manage the temperature of the system.
within the cabinet that's triggering the alarm?
Within the cabinet, yes.
And I guess my final question, I mean, we've got apartments on one side of this and the entire neighborhood on the other side. What are the fumes, the chemical fumes that are generated by a lithium-ion battery fire?
I can get that for you. So they test that also as part of the UL 9540A. They test the quantity of fumes as part of that's discharged. They ensure that the gases expelled during a thermal runaway event are not expelled in an explosive fashion, right? So all that is tested by a third-party independent testing agency.
But even if they're not expelled in an explosive fashion, you can still have a plume of the chemical fumes, right, resulting from the fire?
Yes.
Did you do any diligence with respect to prevailing wind patterns at any particular time of year to determine to what extent the neighborhood on the east side and the apartments on the north side would be at risk?
The amount of fumes is fairly minimal. Again, that is part of the UL testing to make sure that those fumes are meet the thresholds of UL.
Thank you, sir.
And these aren't like combustions, right? It's a very slow burn, and these, there's no toxic chemicals in the battery that would, you know, create the whole city to like have, issues with air quality. It would act much in like a normal fire, but you don't have the chemicals. It doesn't put off toxic chemicals.
Commissioner Guerra, who's virtual this evening, has a few questions. Freddie?
Hey, thank you. Just two questions. One is, what are the typical health concerns from a, private citizen perspective that you run across? And then also maybe kind of talking through, the typical maintenance routine that occurs and how often that happens.
I'm not, on the regards to the first question, I'm not aware of any typical health concerns. Lithium-ion batteries in general are very prevalent. Everyone probably has one in their pocket right now, as well as parking them in their car, in their garages at night with EVs become more prevalent.
Yeah, it's cobalt and nickel, right? That's the major components, and lithium of the battery.
Freddie, what was the second question?
And the second question was just in regards to typical maintenance, how often that occurs and what entails the maintenance when it is done.
So there'd be a standard maintenance plan. So there's like monthly maintenance, which is like cleaning of the cabinets. These aren't running. There's no combustion running through them like a gas plant or anything. So it's relatively low maintenance, but it's, we're cleaning cabinets. If something comes off, or if we have issues with the operating, they'll get in and change any warranty items that are needed. And then there's a decommissioning plan. So, after the useful life of the batteries, everything would be recycled and put back into its normal condition, pre-existing condition.
Thank you.
Mr. Morgan, who's online, could I get your who your company's with? We just hear you virtually. That's all.
Yeah. So I'm with Prologis.
Okay.
So we'll be the owner, and we're the owner at the current facility, and then we'll be the owner and operator of the energy storage system.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Ed has a few questions. Ed?
Yes. First question, there was some reference to the noise, that it would be fairly minimal. I'm assuming there's like fans in some form. It had a less than 10 megawatt categorization, 40 to 60 decibels, I think. And so, and put in perspective, like in total, what how much noise does it actually generate?
So really the only noise would be from the air conditioning units to cool the batteries. Those would be during times when it's hotter outside, right? The air conditioning units are not much louder than a residential, small commercial air conditioning unit.
Okay.
And these packs are liquid cooled as well, so it's very little air conditioning, and there's actually liquid cooling that run through the cabinets.
Okay. The second question, from a connection standpoint, the connection to the grid, who does that installation and who oversees that?
So that'll be Encore, and that'll take place in existing easements.
Okay.
And we have an interconnection agreement directly with Encore, which scopes the project connecting to the distribution line.
Okay. And then in terms of, just putting it in perspective, so the 9.9 megawatt battery, would that power, I'm trying to get a perspective, will that power that facility in total for some period of time?
The system's designed for 1 hour of backup at that full load, at
Okay.
9.9 megawatts.
And then this size, or just this particular setup will, and I know the opposite of what I'm about to say is probably true, but from a power pull from the grid standpoint, I know it's designed to actually help support the grid, but is there a possibility that it could affect the grid in a negative way, where it's pulling power at when, let's say, there was brownout or what have you, there's a substantial load on it, and it is actually pulling more from the grid than from the surrounding community, thus affecting the households negatively?
I'm going to say no. So their Encore, as part of their due diligence, goes through a full interconnect study, which has been completed, to do that evaluation. And that is counter to what the intent of the battery system is.
Right.
So
yeah, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Yeah, they can manage it, right? So if they reach like a high load, that, since we're connecting through their system, they can regulate us to not be able to charge.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're charging when there's excess power on the grid.
Something he said triggered me. So here in the summary of your report, you say there'll be less utility outages for Coppell businesses and residents. But I'm kind of confused. Is this a backup for the Subaru dealership, or is this simply something that ERCOT can call upon to put power from the batteries onto the grid during times of power shortage?
So this is not directly connected to the Subaru facility.
Right.
This is
Just a standalone.
This would be what ERCOT would consider a distributed generation resource that they can call upon to support the grid. And the other benefits of the battery storage compared to what the typical distributed generation systems, gas-fired power plants, it's a lot quicker to respond as well. So that has added benefits over those types of systems for that ERCOT node.
Our batteries can respond in milliseconds, and we're really looked at like capacity, providing capacity onto the grid.
Right, but once the power hits the distribution wire that ERCOT's got and Encore operates, there's no means of telling that any amount of that power would actually go to Coppell or any of the residents or businesses, right?
Not directly. Usually it's based on congestion, right? So the way the grid is set up now, you have most of the energy that's supplied by large power plants outside of outside of urban areas, right? Sometimes those transmission lines become congested. Sometimes the local distribution becomes congested. So having smaller, clean energy resources that can produce power or provide power to the grid more locally is advantageous for that node. To relieve congestion.
But only in the sense that it would be just as advantageous for Frisco or Prosper or Plano, right?
These resources aren't large enough that they would really be able to supply that broad.
No, I don't mean that. But once you put your power on the distribution line, it's impossible to track to know where it actually goes. You're simply increasing the amount of power on the grid to respond to greater load, right?
I'm going to say yes. It'd be similar, though, to a freeway getting clogged and having a local freeway that's in that local node or that local area, right?
Right.
So you can't really control who's on that freeway, but really it only supports that local area based on the size. So
I guess when it says less utility outages for Coppell businesses and residents, it creates the impression that somehow this power is dedicated to our community, or that somehow we're receiving a direct benefit from the power. And that's not really the way it works, is it?
You're still getting a benefit. It's on that local distribution line. So, it's where that distribution line goes, right? So it goes on to distribution and then down into homes, businesses off that distribution line.
That local substation that we're connected to doesn't supply power to 3 substations over. Generally, the power flows downstream in those cases. And so generally, we're not pushing power back up to the transmission level.
Right, no, I understand. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Cindy?
Thank you. I have a question about the fire suppression system. What is the firefighting substance that's in the suppression system?
I can get that information for you. I don't know if without.
Okay, so you don't know if it is the traditional firefighting foam, or it's not water, it sounds like.
It's not water, and I don't believe it's foam.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn, why not?
If a child gets over the fence into your battery system, how easy would it be to get inside the batteries?
I'm going to say it'd be generally very difficult. If you want to think about it, we have electrical distribution system all throughout the city in the form of transformers, right, that are locked. So for not just child safety, but general Prologis site security, all those battery cabinets will also be locked.
Okay.
And have locks on them.
Yeah, all the
closed.
batteries and all the cabinets have their specific locking, right? So it's like getting into a storage container that's locked, right? That they're not going to be able to open it without a key.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sue, fire away.
Maybe this is a question for staff, but in relation, when a few of the other questions were being asked, what led me to ask the question of where is the closest fire hydrant to the system? Because this wasn't an original design.
Yeah, I'm not sure offhand, but the fire department has reviewed the request, and they will review it again with the fire protection plan.
Okay, thank you.
Any other
And
questions?
part of our safety plan will have all of the fire hydrants on premises, and then what's the best safety and emergency route for if something does catch on fire. There'll be a whole safety plan, an emergency plan.
Okay. Any other questions by the commission? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
This is a public hearing. I didn't see anybody that was signed up, but is there anybody who'd like to speak for or against the proposed application? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Discussion by the commission?
It seems to me like there's a lot of information that's forthcoming. You know, you didn't have it with you, and you would supply it later. So I don't think now is the right time to vote on this, because I don't have enough information, enough answers to our questions.
Okay. Glenn?
Given the fact that Prologis is the backer of this facility and has done the due diligence for it, I think we're probably okay. If there's a disaster, Prologis is the first party getting sued. And it's their financial backing that will go behind any loss. So the representative who's speaking at this hearing about what they're proposing has obviously done the background work to justify this installation, and it's going on their property.
Well, let me take Cindy's question a little further to staff. Staff, I didn't anticipate the cross-examination, but is staff comfortable with the application, with the notion that the applicant will provide more information to the questions that have been asked?
Right, all the information pretty much sounds fire-related, and that will be provided with the fire protection permit. So, and it will be evaluated by our fire department for compliance with their code. So we are comfortable bringing it forward to council.
I wish our fire chief, Mr. Oates, was here, but this is kind of like a new animal for Coppell. So are they versed in this stuff too?
I would assume so. I did have a discussion with the fire marshal regarding, if a fire were to take place here, And what he told me was it would cut off from the entire grid, and then they would let it burn. And they would monitor, that is if it got out of control. And so it sounds like they have a plan of action, but that comes after, everything's been reviewed and everything like that, and probably won't ever happen, so.
Okay. We're fortunate we have city attorney.
It won't ever happen until it happens. All right, so what you would do is add a condition that it has to meet the requirements of the adopted fire code of the city, and they'll review it. I mean, I'm not a fire expert, I'm not a battery expert, I'm not an electrician, I'm not an engineer, I'm a lawyer. So what you would want to do is put the provision or the condition in there that it meets the applicable fire codes approved by the fire marshal, and that'll take care of that issue regarding fire prevention. I appreciate your questions, but I don't know the answer to any of them. The mere fact that he doesn't know the answer to any of them, and I don't know what training y'all have, but I don't know what training you have for that. So I don't want you to make that judgment. I want the fire marshal to make the judgment. Your requirement would be for them to have the requisite permit and meet the applicable codes, because that's their legal obligation. So I hear what you're saying, but I can't write a condition and enforce a condition based on what you know. I can based on what the fire marshal knows. If you put that requirement, they have to meet the fire marshal and the fire protection and the fire code, then it'll be done, or they won't get a permit and they won't be able to move forward. So.
Okay, thank you. For the record, that's our city attorney, Bob Hager. Okay. Other discussion, Cindy?
Yeah, just to clarify, the basis of my question on what the fire suppression material will be, I guess we can add a condition, because I don't want the fire suppression material to contain PFAS, which is a common chemical which EPA is evaluating right now. It's a common chemical used in firefighting foam, like at airports and things, and we don't want that in the fire suppression system and washing into this drainage ditch and down into the neighborhood nearby. But I would be glad to add a condition to specify that the fire suppression substance does not contain, and this is just all caps, PFAS.
Other discussion, other comments by the commission?
I mean, I think my concern really is that I understand that ERCOT has fast-tracked this. We all lived through Snowmageddon. And I know that they're really trying to find ways to increase the amount of dispatchable power so that they can respond to that sort of thing. Of course, there's no indication that lithium batteries that are stored outside like this would have been available anyways or had anything to do to help us during Snowmageddon. But I just think, when people start fast-tracking things and they're novel technologies in a relative sense, that, there's not a lot of experience with these. They don't have a lot of experience building or constructing them, and it's right across the street from a neighborhood and just south of an apartment complex. And if there's a fire, I hear them say that, the fumes will be fine, and I just don't think if there was a huge lithium battery plant on fire that I'd go up there and start inhaling heavily for my health. So given its proximity to neighborhoods and that sort of thing, I can't vote for this. I think I don't like people fast-tracking stuff that we're going to put right next to a bunch of people's where they're living. And I'm not comfortable with that.
Commissioner Guerra, virtually there?
No, I agree with Commissioner Walker. My concern, it was really, also the public health and safety issues with it. Obviously there has to be some concerns, and maybe those watching this hearing right now or this meeting, I think there has to be more information related to that, because there has to be some public concerns related to this. I would like to know that, and I guess as a commission, I think it'd be nice if that information was presented. But I completely agree with Commissioner Walker.
Okay. Any other discussion by the commission?
Just two quick comments. One, that based on Commissioner Bishop's comment. My only concern with adding that as a condition is, not that I don't trust your expertise in this area, I don't know what that is, or if it is, if it's a reasonable ask to exclude that, if the applicant is, if that's can be potentially consistent with their system or not. So that concerns me a bit. But I mean, in general, I mean, I think from a use standpoint, and being on Prologic's property, and it's relatively small. I mean, I absolutely see all of the health concerns potentially if there's some sort of issue or disaster or fire, but from a power standpoint and from a size, and I think maybe my only concern was if someone had the ability to drive into it, so having some protection around it, but I don't know that I'd necessarily make that a requirement, because it is it's not necessarily a high speed area. It's less like a fuel station when you have cars coming in and out. So I don't know that that's necessarily something I would make as a condition. And I would assume that Prologis would look at that. Obviously, it's probably fairly expensive to put something like this in, so they want to protect the investment. But in general, I would vote in favor of it.
So balancing all around safety and new technology and innovation there. Glenn?
Are you ready for a motion?
I'm just about to turn it over. Is there a motion by the commission?
Okay. I'm going to move that PD-272R2R2-LI Battery Energy Storage System et al. Be approved, subject to staff conditions, adding the final condition that the facility must obtain the Coppell Fire Department permit for operation. That will give the fire department and the fire chief the chance to look at the system, figure out if its health operation is within safety standards and United Labs requirements. That's a third party who gets to look at it. It's a third party who lives and works in the city and has the expertise that nobody up on this dais has.
We have a motion by Commissioner Portman. Is there a second?
Just a clarification, is that last part of your motion?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. Okay.
Is there a second on the motion on the floor?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Portman and a second by Commissioner Marr. Cammie, would you call the roll, please?
Please respond by saying aye or nay as I call your name. Commissioner Blankenship?
Aye.
Commissioner Guerra?
Nay.
Vice Chair Portman?
Aye.
Chairman Haas?
Nay.
Commissioner Maurer?
Aye.
Commissioner Walker?
Nay.
Commissioner Bishop?
Nay.
Bear with me. 3 in favor, 4 opposed. The motion is denied.
Okay. We don't normally have one of those, but obviously some more research and needs to be brought forward. So we've made our decision on that. I would direct you to visit with staff on if you'd like to appeal to the council or next steps that you'd like to take it to. Okay. Going to move on. We got a loaded night tonight. Item 6 on the agenda is, item 7 is a public hearing. This is to consider approval of PD-250R28-H, Main Street, Old Town, a zoning change request from H Historic to Plan Development 250 Revision 28-Historic to allow this property to the conceptual plan development for the Main Street Old Town project, creating 7 lots with 6 proposed 2-story buildings and 2 mixed-use professional office and residential, and 1 mixed-use medical office / retail / restaurant and residential, 2 mixed-use retail / restaurant and residential, and 1 retail / restaurant and a common parking lot on 0.946 acres of property located on the southwest corner of Main Street and West Bethel Road. At the request of Chaddick Capital and Chaddick Management, and being represented by Greg Franca of GPF Architects and developer Chris Collins. We have a staff presentation by Ms. Mary Prawn Boswell. Mary?
Thank you, Chairman. This item 7 may look familiar. So this is similar to a request that came forward before you in November of 2022. The Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval at that time for that proposal. That proposal, which was very similar, went before City Council, and that request for that site failed by a vote of 3 to 4 at City Council. So this is a revised proposal, and I'll kind of go through it and tell you what's different from the last one. So this site is located at the southwest corner of Bethel Road and Main Street. The site is just under an acre in size and is proposed to have 7 lots containing 6 new buildings, 5 of which are mixed use, and 1 retail restaurant building and a parking lot. Mixed use, meaning that the commercial and residential uses have separate entrances and can have separate occupancies. The main change from the previous submittal to this submittal is the proposed uses for the buildings, with restaurant uses being added to buildings 3 through 6, and the addition of medical office and retail to building 6. Buildings 1 and 2 are mixed use, will front West Bethel. So the proposal is for office on the first floor, residential above. Building 3 is located at the corner of Main and Bethel and is proposed to be commercial on both floors with the potential for retail and restaurant. Buildings 4 and 5 will front Main Street and be mixed use with a combination or opportunities for retail, restaurant, and residential. And Building 6 will front Main Street and also be mixed use with potential for retail, restaurant, medical office, and residential above. These will have a similar spacing to the existing buildings to the south. The residential portion will be located on the 2nd floor and will have 2 garage spaces on the ground level, access from the rear of the lot. Lot 7X is not developable and will be solely used as a parking lot. It will have, this is part of the PD conditions. A sidewalk will be built along Bethel Road connecting the sidewalk, and then connecting sidewalks will be constructed from the proposed lot 7 to the parking lot to the street frontages via 4-foot sidewalk easement located in between each of the buildings. And we have no signs proposed with this development. In terms of parking, so parking for the site will be a combination of garage parking, on-street parking on Main Street, parking on proposed lot 7X, which will be required with the construction of the first building, and parking spaces from the existing public parking lot nearby. Using the most intense use, the parking required would be 118 spaces versus the 74 that were previously required. Obviously, this number will change dependent on the type of use that ultimately goes in the buildings. Why the big change in the number? If you have restaurant, so this was calculated with restaurant at all of the uses where it was proposed. So obviously that number will be less if the proposal is, retail versus the restaurant. This site is proposed to be added to the conceptual plan development for the Old Town Main Street project and the existing POA for maintenance of the parking lot and amenities, which include, benches, a dumpster, trash receptacles, bike racks, sidewalks in between the buildings, etc. So in terms of landscaping, there are no changes to the landscape plan from the previous submittal. Again, existing hackberry and crepe myrtles interior to the site will be removed, as well as a bur oak, which is in poor condition. A tree removal permit will be required to remove the trees on site. There's also some hackberry trees that will need to be removed to provide access to the site through the existing city parking lot. on the south of the site. We'll have to coordinate with the Parks Department. The developer will be planting additional overstory trees on site. It'll be a combination of cedar elm, Chinese pistache, lacebark elm, Texas red oak. The yards will have a variety of landscaping that includes trees, grass, shrubs, undercovers, ground covers, and the focus, with the focus being on the front yards. The parking lot, 7X, will also have trees located in the islands and western perimeter. The building lots have a range of 32 to 36% landscaping. Per the developer, the POA will maintain all the landscaping on site. So these are just some renderings. These are the same renderings as before, so they weren't updated to reflect the change in the building heights for Building 1 and Building 6. So here you have, but everything else is the same, the design, the colors, the materials. So the top picture is West Bethel looking towards the south, and the bottom picture is Main Street looking westward. So the development will contain 6 buildable lots, and the buildings will share common design elements and materials. They are in compliance with historic district design guidelines. Each of the buildings will be 2-story, with heights varying from 28 feet to just under 35 feet. Building 1, the height has increased 2 feet, and Building 6, the height has decreased 4 feet from the previous submittal. In your packet, you had a picture of the material board, which identifies the materials and the colors. It'll be a common shingle, brick, and stone used within the structures, as well as building trims and accent colors. There will be 2-car garage doors will be decorative insulated metal in the arts and crafts style, and more detailed information was provided on the elevations in your packet. So this slide, again, is just some more renderings giving you different perspectives from different angles. So Bethel towards the south, Main Street towards the west, and the bottom towards the middle is existing view on Main Street. So the old Coppell master plan was done in 2002, states that it uses a mix of zoning that will accommodate a rich and variety of uses. It states that the land use plan shown should remain flexible to adapt the changing market conditions. So this site here is outlined. So the mixed use retail with service concentration is identified in red. The plan states retail and service uses should be concentrated in the core of Old Coppell along Bethel and Coppell roads, identified by the red color. Each use, or uses such as specialty retail, are critical to generating pedestrian traffic in the study area. In the case of multi-story buildings, office and residential uses are appropriate for upper floors. Being a mixed-use category, uses such as office and residential are permitted. So again, this is taken from the 2002 master plan. We're just going to read some of the captions that were listed here for the existing and proposed conditions in the plan that was done at that time. So the one on the left represents a visual simulation. So the left is existing conditions at that time. Coppell Road looking south to Bethel Road intersection. The existing condition has deficiencies both functionally and aesthetically. Functionally, there are not enough buildings to generate a critical mass and create a vibrant and economically healthy commercial district. The lack of sidewalk discourages pedestrian activity, and the overhead wiring creates visual clutter. And then to the right is a proposed condition. Coppell Road, so it's the same view corridor. We've got Coppell Road looking south to Bethel Road intersection. The proposed condition transforms the existing condition to a highly desirable environment. Compatible new infill development reinforces the district's character, provides building enclosure for a more comfortable street that will generate activity and greater economic prosperity. The new streetscape will be attractive to pedestrians, and the on-street parking provides a buffer between pedestrians and moving vehicles. So this is a new zoning case, so we did send out new letters, 17 within 200 feet and 144 within 800 feet. As of this afternoon, before the meeting, we did receive 10 emailed responses, 8 in favor that were within the 200 feet, additional 2 within the 800 feet. And I guess sometime during the meeting, we received 1 email in opposition to this request. So staff is recommending approval of the request with the following conditions. 1, there may be additional comments during detailed engineering review. 2, the final plat cannot be filed until buildings have been removed and zoning is approved. 3, tree removal permit will be required prior to construction. 4, to coordinate with the Parks Department for the removal of off-site trees and relocation of irrigation south of Lot 7 to allow for access via the city's parking lot. Number 5, Lot 7X Block A, Main Street Old Town Addition, shall only be used for parking. 6, Lot 7X Block A, Main Street Old Town Addition will not have street frontage, but will be accessible via an access easement which will be required between Lot 7X Block A, Main Street Old Town Addition, and the City of Coppell. 7, that the existing 15 parking spaces on Main Street in front of this development shall be counted for this development on the condition that this development becomes part of the Old Town POA. 8, existing parking spaces in the Old Town area shall be counted towards this development on the condition that the development becomes part of the Old Town POA. 9, the POA shall be responsible for maintenance of the common area proposed Lot 7X Block A, Main Street Old Town Addition, and all landscaping. 10, all signage must comply with the H District ordinance requirements. 11, Building 3 will not have to have residential uses, but may have a commercial occupancy on the second floor. 12, maximum building height shall not exceed 35 feet above finished floor. 13, the POA shall maintain all amenities, including benches, dumpster, trash, receptacles, bicycle racks, sidewalk easements between the buildings, etc. 14, the POA shall maintain the private drainage easement. 15, that they should submit a letter from the Old Town Main Street POA stating that they will accept this development into their POA and all responsibilities and conditions stated above. That is the end of my presentation, and I believe the applicant is here as well to answer any questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mary. Any questions of staff by the commission? Cindy?
I just have one quick clarification on that simulated photo
Yeah.
slide. Can you go back to that one? I'll make sure I've got it in perspective. The picture on the left, the existing condition, so we're looking at the barber shop, and then across the street, that's the local diner? Is that?
No.
No.
Those 2 buildings have been relocated or removed.
Right, the building down, like if you follow the street to the end,
Yes.
that house or that building has been removed. It is no longer there. That was removed to make way for the continuation of Main Street into Old Town. So I believe that building was relocated. The building to the left, the gas station.
Oh, okay.
That was
So this is really
demolished.
old. This is
This is
really
like
old.
2002.
Okay, because I was going to say, there's a sidewalk there now on the left.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this
That's-
is
okay,
this
thanks.
is like at the beginning, 2002.
I got you now. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Mary, the Old Town Plan is still the latest and greatest plan and vision for Old Town Coppell.
Correct. Until we hear otherwise.
Okay. Any other questions of staff before we turn it over to the applicant for his presentation? Okay. If we could get your name and address for the record.
So my name is Chris Collins. I live at 564 South Coppell Road here in Coppell, Texas, where I operate a live-work that I live on the second floor and have my Keller Williams office on the first floor. So here we go again. So a couple of the changes that we made after going before council, and I'm just going to come from a developer's perspective without these units being sold yet. So our attempt at the zoning change that we've made here is to come up with something that can be used to meet the request that came out of the council meeting when we attempted 3 different options in zoning and failed at all 3. One was we started out as office buildings. We made a recommendation to take the 4 buildings that faced Main Street. Council member asked me what I thought would be the best breakdown of bringing retail, residential, and restaurant to this project. With the pedestrian traffic that I personally see operating on my business on South Coppell Road into Old Town on a daily basis, there seems to be a north-south pedestrian traffic. Going west from Bethel, on Bethel, from Main Street and South Coppell Road, there's just not a lot of traffic. There's no reason to go that direction. When you get coming southbound on South Coppell Road and you go into Old Town on the Main Street, or you turn left, there's other businesses there. The local diner, the gift shop, the barber shop, Tattered Style, and then the business that are further down. So we've noticed this pattern. So my recommendation when I was asked was that the 4 buildings that faced Main Street would be restaurant, retail. The reason for the medical, it is the only building that we are currently working with a potential buyer on, and that would be a business that is located inside Lifestream. They service veterans and do brain, TBI, PSTD recovery. And we have been through multiple series of conversations, and so it is the highest potential at this point to sell that building, and that would be the medical use. So that's why that building is tagged specifically with the medical. Other than that, the other 3 buildings that are facing Main Street would be primarily directed towards a restaurant use, retail use, with a possible residential above. Then because of the lack of pedestrian traffic, I don't know that a business would be a viable retail or restaurant if they were down towards Founders Crossing and the other 3 buildings headed west. So that was my initial recommendation. We attempted that. There was some confusion in the policy and procedures for getting motions amended. It didn't carry. There was another motion brought before to attempt to take them all 6 to retail, which I would have been acceptable with, and I'll explain that next. And it didn't carry. And so I believe post that meeting, both the council, myself, the mayor, city manager's office, we've talked about how to move forward with this project. I don't doubt that even though the opposition concerns removing the old buildings, that there's a desire to see a progressive Old Town, to see something change down there that's going to bring energy and change and some movement forward. I believe this project is a candidate for that. Understanding that no matter what the zoning is approved here today, what city council approves, the statement in the master plan that states to change with market conditions is crucial. And understanding that if all of these buildings, if this project was approved as presented, if one of the buildings that happens to be on Bethel, if I'm wrong about that, and they wanted to create a restaurant or a retail shop there, all that would be required is that they file an amendment to the PD of Old Town and rezone the one individual building for a specific use, and go through this process again to change the zoning from office to retail or restaurant, if the market conditions dictated that. So what we've presented is what I believe would be a very viable opportunity to move forward with a progressive Old Town. Knowing that if in the future the retail or the restaurant didn't come to fruition over the years, I know that the City Council has engaged with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Discover Coppell. All of this is with the hopes that we're going to be able to turn what Old Town looks like today into a more vibrant, bustling area. I was down Saturday. It was the first opening weekend of the farmers market. It was the largest farmers market I've seen down there. There were more people in Old Town than I've seen before, and we had more traffic in front of our office than we've seen before in the past years. I don't know if any of you make your way by, but we have a water cooler that sits in front of my office at the corner of Heath and South Coppell Road. Just sits out there, holds water bottles. We're up to about 8 to 10 cases of bottled water a week, picked up by pedestrian traffic going northbound and southbound on South Coppell Road. So I feel like I've got a little bit of room to speak about what we're seeing up and down. My business as a real estate office, as you know, is mostly relational. We actually have had 4 clients walk in our front door interested in doing business with us because we're right there. So that vibrance that we're looking for is coming. I believe this project will give that opportunity. Moving forward, we made some change. Mr. Haas, I know that your vote was the only one we were missing last time with being unanimous, and it was over density. It came up in the council meeting. Councilman Brianna was concerned about density as well. And so when we went back and revisited the density, we started getting into the definition, what is density? Density in this situation is normally calculated how many buildings per square acre. But if you were to go to the Let It Shine and look at the density, it's 1 building. However, the footprint of Let It Shine covers the entire lot, except for the rear and the landscaping requirements. So if you get into the footprint density of how many square foot of building footprint is on the property, and then if you get into the other density, and this is the word that I'd come up with that connected a lot with people when we talked about density, it's the aspect ratio. What are you looking at? If you look at the current buildings that are facing Bethel, you see no sidewalks between, Main Street, I'm sorry. There's no, there is a space of about 12 to 14 feet, 15 feet in between the buildings, but it's dead space. It's got grass there. Our project, we went in and put sidewalks to create that pedestrian traffic between the buildings. It gives the opportunity, should you have a restaurant or a retail spot, to have a patio in between the buildings in the common area on a public sidewalk, which creates that synergy that we're looking for in Old Town. Each of the buildings have a sidewalk between them, accessing from either Bethel or Main to the rear. Also, that means from the rear you can come to the front. So we've tried to incorporate all of that, but with the ratio aspect, we dropped the roof height of building number 6, which is the one that would be next to Livestream, to come down. The other thing would be the aspect ratio of Founders Crossing. If you're not familiar with that, because of the floodplain and the way the creek runs, the very first building closest to the creek, which would be furthest west, is sitting extremely far back. And then the buildings step forward until they come to the property line, where we'll be stepping forward even more. So there's going to be some discrepancy in what it looks like in renderings compared to what it's going to look like when we're finished. We're not going to have any parking on Bethel because of some recommendations of traffic, so we are going to park in the back so we can bring the buildings a little further forward. The other issue that we had to address, since these buildings aren't already sold, we don't have an end user in mind, the recommendation from the city's attorney was to put the largest building that we could put on the property, knowing that it could be smaller. The highest probability, if these are restaurants, is that there's not going to be a second floor occupied, because who wants to live above a restaurant? It just doesn't make sense that if it ends up being a restaurant, or if it ends up being a retail shop such as Frost or the Wealth Manager or even Livestream, they have space on the second floor, but it's minimal. I think the Frost building, when I showed it to a client, there was about 650 square feet in the second floor. I think the intent was that it would be an office for the bakery. You look at Livestream, it's a very small upstairs. So I don't see that these buildings will ever hit that maximum size that we're asking for approval for, which then would also reduce the height and the aspect ratio. Other than that, elephant in the room. Part of this PD approval requires the plat, before the plat can be filed, that the existing buildings be removed. So as we're all aware, there is a second agenda item this evening for a demolition permit, because this is in the Old Town area, and to remove the buildings, that would be required. So what's the intent? This is what the intent is. My original intent was, if somebody wants to move the buildings, we would be glad to participate in that. We would be glad to assist in the financial obligation to move the buildings. Obviously, I've got to pay to tear them down. I would rather pay to move them. But if they can't find another location somewhere else, we were intending to repurpose, which is also part of the master plan. The deli man is a perfect example of that. When he went to tear down the old dilapidated deli, he had to reincorporate some of the items, i.e. the awnings, because that was the signature of the deli. And so my intent has always been, if we can't move the building somewhere else, to repurpose materials from the buildings into these buildings to bring on that essence of what was there and preserve it. So it's kind of where we're at with the demolition permit. Was just because you approve a permit to demolish the buildings doesn't mean that we're not repurposing them before they're removed, but the demolition permit would be required once we've pulled what we intend to use, the wainscoting, the floors, the doors, the windows, etc. But then we would have to come back and still take down what's not used. And so that's the purpose of the demolition permit. Time is a deal killer in the development world. If we have to wait another 6 months because nobody could come up with a solution for moving the buildings, we have to move forward, because interest rates being what they are today, this gets very expensive. So we would like to move forward with the demolition permit with the understanding that there has been an option drawn up to move the buildings to another location inside the city, have them repurposed, and I'm open to anyone that's interested in saving them. I have opened up in our last go around an opportunity for people to come sit and visit with me at my office about what can we do to save the buildings. And no one yet has come up with a solution other than put the burden on the city and or raise money. The only person that I'm aware of that has offered any private money for the purpose of moving these buildings is myself, the developer. So my intentions are pretty clear. Would like to see the buildings moved and refurbished, if not, repurposed, and what's left after the repurposing removed so that we can move forward with the project. So I think we've come full circle to trying to meet all the needs. I believe that there are some further meetings that the City Council is planning on having so that they can get a little more direction of where Old Town's going. And so my prayer is that we'll move forward to the council.
Thank you for that refresher on the case and all the work that you've done since then, and thank you for reminding me I was the only one that went the other way on it.
It broke my heart.
And I still have a question about it.
That's why I'm here.
Yes. So, Mary, can you pull up that image of the old town? So the image to the right, it obviously is a two-story structure, and followed by another attached structure that looks to be, it could be two hidden underneath the roof. It could be one story with just a higher pitched roof. And as I look at that image, obviously it's an older image because the Kirkland House was still there, the gas station was still there, and that's all different. But as I read through the plan, massing of new buildings shall be consistent with general massing of the existing character-defining buildings. So I think about the proposed application, and I'm thinking about the post op with the barber shop there, and I'm thinking about some of the other shops there. They're all single story. The local diner's a single story. So my question is, has there been any thought about any one of the 6 lots being a single story versus a 2-story? So that there's some attempt to, it's not so, I called it, what did I call it, dense or massive? I couldn't remember what the word I used, but it's not so heavy, but with 2-story creating this vertical feel. And you've done a very good job, no question. You've done a very good job, and I'm sure if it passes, you will do a good job. But I'm thinking that it's setting the stage for a continuation of possibly 2-story if on other development within the old town. And the flavor feels that there also are single story intermixed. So was there any thought to a single story being a part of your development?
Once again, when we come back to what we've presented, it is what makes, one, what will comply, and second, leaving the opportunity without having to come through here again because somebody chooses to do something different. Okay. When we went into 1-story, 2-story, all 3 buildings that face Main Street are 2-story buildings with a second floor that is in use with the business. Frost Cupcake has approximately 600 to 800 square feet up front.
Okay.
On the second floor. The financial planner has a second set of offices. They have a second-story dead space above the garage because they didn't build it originally with the firewall, so they can't finish it out like they planned. Livestream also has a second floor with an office that's being used. And so when you go across the street to George's, obviously the biggest building in Old Town in size and mass, we all know the second floor is a residential component. Local Diner, Let It Shine, was the most recent building built. It has a second floor. Those second floor apartments or dwellings were built. It's probably same in height and proximity to what we're looking at. If you look at the other buildings, the financial planning building at the corner across the street from the Art Center, that's a 2-story building. The Collective is a 2-story building. The 2-story part isn't as relative, I believe, as what you're talking about with the aspect ratio or the mass of the building. So if the mass of the building on the second floor was restricted in size, thus lowering the pitch of the roof, et cetera, yes. Or if it was a PD requirement that the buildings on Bethel it's the same thing.
Yeah,
all of the buildings there are high enough to have a second floor, but if we were to reduce the size of the second floor, the project is still financially viable and changing that aspect ratio of the buildings looking so big.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
I'm trying.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. Okay. I did have some analysis on lot coverage. The lot coverage for the proposed application, the 6 lots relative to some of the others, and it's generally in line with the others, the George, 709, 713. But it just, when I see the one rendering, can you put the rendering there? Yeah, there you go. And I know 6, you drop 6 by 4 feet. And so it's in line there. Maybe it's 2 feet larger than 5, but it's still lower than 4 at 34 feet. But, you know, still in my mind, I'm still wrestling with how dense it seems. But I do appreciate some of the other design elements you put into it, and I get it, right? It's the corner, the entry to Old Town, and you got to have an anchor. I get it.
Wow was the word that was used in our planning.
I'm sorry?
Wow.
Wow, yeah, okay. And so that's just what I'm wrestling with in my mind. But and then I understand that, so you did have some engagements, talking to folks, and I think you said that no one really came by to talk about it, or did they come by to talk about it with you? Maybe I misunderstood.
We had a Frito pie party. We mentioned that. We had several people show up, but they were more to just voice concern. When people found out the truth about repurposing the condition of the current buildings, we generally left with just a few people in opposition. Of course, I just did a little bit of door knocking in Old Town this week, talking to other business owners and a few of the residents. And my sense is that the majority of the people that we've engaged are looking for that progressive move forward. There is the opposition to the removal of the old buildings, and there just will be.
So I want to make sure I understood what I heard you say. So you're coming in with the most you could come in for, and you're not opposed to something less if someone buys a lot and they want to do something slightly less.
So the one person that I've had the most engagement with are the doctors over next door. And so the cost comes up in buildings are built by the square foot. And so the way to reduce cost is reduce the square foot. So the economics and the use of the buildings would more than likely dictate what this looks like in the future is a smaller project. However, we were encouraged as we were designing this to ask for the most because we couldn't change it once it was approved without coming through the whole process again. So if it was required of us as the developer to reduce the size or pitch of the roofs, we would accept that condition, as well as if the council requires us to change the zoning to approve the project, we're willing to do that.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the applicant? Okay, we may come back to you after the public hearing. Thank you. All righty, so this is a public hearing. We do have folks that have signed up to speak on items 7 and 8. I have two pages worth, so I'm just going to go down the line here, and as I call your name, please come up, state your name and address for the record, and then you will have about 3 minutes to present your thoughts on the proposed application. Please try to keep it to 3 minutes. A lot less folks than I thought would be here tonight, but still try to keep it to 3 minutes, please. So I have, looks like Rory Carrier, okay. Followed then by Sarah. Okay.
Good evening, I'm Rory Carrick, 123 Lodge Road in Coppell, Texas. We've been here about 25 years. So my little speech started out by saying I don't know why we're here again, because this plan development is exactly what was denied by the City Council. But now listening to Mr. Collins, it's clear that we've got some closed doors discussions going on with our mayor and council members coming up with a solution that'll get passed by council. But nevertheless, we are here again. Our position has not changed. We're against this development. Last time we were here, we had 400 petition signatures. Today, we have 1,650 and growing petition signatures. Mr. Collins will tell you it's a few of us back here that have a problem with this. It's not. We're nearly up, we've got 1,600 people that do not want the building torn down. They don't want this massive building sitting in this Old Town Coppell. This is the gateway to Old Town. If you'd approve this development with these massive buildings, it changes the entire image of Old Town. And let me tell you what happens from here. As soon as this is approved and these are built, the developer also has the right of first refusal for the property on the southwest corner, northwest corner. He'll be back here in a year or two to put up more of those on that corner. The cottage salon will be torn down. There's a lady who'll speak here tonight, her livelihood will be gone. And once those buildings are up on those corners, there'll be 4 other properties, 4 retail that are operating out of old buildings. 4 in Old Town Coppell. That's it. That's the old buildings. Those buildings, the property tax will double. They'll be out of business. They'll look like crappy old buildings in the middle of all these brand new buildings. So there's the rest of the people sitting here will lose their jobs, will lose their businesses. For what? This is our old town. It should be cherished by our citizens and appointed officials. Every city in Dallas has invested in their old buildings and their history. Think about Grapevine, Allen, Louisville, Garland, Carrollton, Frisco, McKinney, even Salina. And Coppell, we built those. That's our investment in Old Town. So finally, I'd also like you to really consider, does Coppell need these anyway? Mr. Collins has 5 of these mixed-use live-work properties on the market for a year now. He hasn't sold any. He's dropped the price hugely, and he still hasn't sold them. There's a lot, literally 2 minutes walk up from this particular development that has been sitting open for a year. This is what we're going to have right here. Nobody will buy these because it's exactly the same thing. Do we really want a big open lot after we've torn down 2 historic buildings? And just remember, this is not about land right use. The owner has options. We've given the owner options. This is not his only option to sell. So we talked about this last time. Just want you to bear that in mind. You guys make the decision. The City Council makes the decision. What do you want for Old Town? Because if you do this, there is no Old Town. Then it's New Town. And that's fine. If we decide as a city, but there's 1,650 people that absolutely disagree with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Carrick, please. Followed by Joe Shirley.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Carrick, live at 123 Lodge Road, but I own Jacaranda Gift Shop, which is diagonally opposite the proposed development. So here we are again, 3 months later, with very few changes. Our stance has not changed either. We are dead against this development. The last time this was brought to P&Z Commission, some of your votes were cast based on the concern about the rights of the seller and the concern for how many months of work the developer has put into this project. It's my understanding that you're supposed to vote based solely on land use and not the seller's or developer's rights. Nevertheless, here we are, and I'm asking you then to consider the rights of the existing businesses. We've paid our property taxes, we've created sales tax revenue, we've brought people to Old Town and directed them to city-owned and built facilities in Old Town. We've renovated and maintained our buildings and properties to the levels stipulated in the Old Town Master Plan and the historic overlay. We've both supported and advertised city-held events and created our own events at our own cost to bring people to the whole Old Town area. We've not left our buildings to deteriorate. We've not left a prime piece of high potential land sit empty for years. How about giving us existing business owners who own original old Coppell buildings some respect and showing us the same concern? We have proven ourselves over the years to be successful businesses. We have a loyal customer base and we bring money into the city. If you choose to keep the buildings in place, we have the possibility of renovating and restoring them and creating a much needed, affordable, small event or even wedding space in the church. We can add a permanent small and micro business spaces with an optional shared workrooms in the Creatoria building, the annex. not a flea market setup, which is what the developer has been spreading around town. A large green space, an existing green space, will keep the existing trees and landscaping, fence it off. That can be part of the small event space. We will get to keep the small town feel that many that moved to Coppell were looking for, and many who visit Coppell come here for. We would like to save the buildings that have historic value to Coppell, to its longtime citizens and families who played an important role and who still play an important role in Coppell's history. We are asking that you deny this proposal and the subsequent demolition of the buildings. At the very least, we are requesting a continuance until the Old Coppell meeting on March the 30th has taken place, where we can have an open and meaningful discussion on the future of Old Town. Thank you. And I would just like to make a clarification. There was talk about the POA sort of supporting this, and I actually got a note from the chairperson of the POA today, and he said, to be clear, the Main Street Coppell PO board is not taking a position for or against the project. As a board, we are not advocating on behalf of the MSC community for either side. Thank you.
And that person
is Hester, Sean Hester.
And they're for the proposed application.
I am not certain, but they had
Per their submittal. Okay.
They had sent a letter, but he was saying that it has to go to a vote to all the residents first. So at this point, they cannot stand for or against it. Okay. Just to clarify.
Thank you. Okay, Joe Shirley, then followed by Karen Ward.
Good evening. Joe Shirley, 582 Villawood Lane, Coppell. I own the Bethel Road Barber Shop, 460 West Bethel Road, diagonally across from the property in consideration. I have not received any notice of this meeting from either at my business or at my house, just to let you know that. I'm opposed to the proposal. We have what we call a historic district, but it seems like that's just a holding pattern until we get everything torn down and rebuilt. And I think it's really critical that we preserve at least a little bit of our history. Virtually, I believe that the Baptist Church and the education building in consideration are the only thing south of Bethel Road that hadn't been torn down, destroyed, or whatnot. The two buildings north of the barber shop, which used to be the city hall and the fire station, are sort of still there, but they've been remodeled beyond recognition. And we're losing Old Town. We're losing the town that I've been here 43 years, and we're losing basically everything that was here when I got here. And so if we have some more buildings or whatever, that doesn't replace what we've lost. And I think that hopefully there'll be some way to utilize the existing building to profit Old Town, profit the community, and so forth. And it's just a shame to lose all of our history. So I'm opposed to this proposal. I'm opposed to tearing the buildings down. And so thank you for your consideration.
Ms. Ward, followed by Ann Dragon.
Hello, Karen Ward, and I am from the Cottage Salon at West Bethel and South Coppell Road. And I'm here today to ask again for all the buildings with history to stay and be restored into affordable rental spaces. And if not, please consider the proposal of the Historical Village to be moved by the city in the lot in front of the senior center. that's owned by the city and have affordable rental spaces. Small businesses need smaller spaces, and then we can provide good prices on our services and products. Our salon provides hair care products, clothes, and jewelry. The Cottage Salon loves serving Coppell and surrounding areas, and we've been there 9 years, and I moved to Coppell in '92 and raised my family. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you much. Ann Dragon, followed by Susan Clark.
Ann Dragon, I live at 727 Bentry Court, and I also own the property at 779 West Main. And if you go back to the Old Town plan, I'll just let you know that I served on the Planning and Zoning Commission 20 years ago. I was also involved in developing this plan 20 years ago. I know I don't look like it, but I can help you out with this. So we're on Coppell Road here on the photo on the left. Go back one. And we're looking at Joe's Barber Shop up there, and you can see on the new simulation that we developed, Joe's still there. You can see his shop. And we talked a little bit about density with you guys. The plan is that it would be a very high-density area. There was no discussion about, that it would just be building after building. And that's what this simulation here on the right photo was supposed to show you. So I know that a lot of the old buildings have been either moved or taken down. I don't think I think that there's a feeling of some of the current business owners that have some of the older buildings maybe feeling threatened that someone's going to want them to take their building down, and I don't think anyone is proposing that. I think the developer came in here and has presented, and it's really the first time that I've seen a full presentation, but exactly what we were asking for 20 years ago. He's showing you guys what we had talked about during this phase in development of this area. And it's taken a long time to get us to where we are today. But this would just be a continuation. And the idea was eventually that South Coppell Road there would also continue with that development. Some of it has been developed, some of it has not. But I think the developer's been generous to offer to move the buildings, to repurpose, part of the buildings. Overall, when I listened to the presentation this evening, I would support approval of this plan. Okay? Any questions?
I do have a question.
All right.
So thank you for your service 20 years ago.
Thank you for your service.
In your involvement in the development of this plan, the image to the right, you considered that this was considered high density? I guess maybe in the standards then, or?
This was considered high density, yeah.
Okay. Just
yeah.
want to make sure.
In fact, if I had a question to the applicant, my question would go back more on the issues that I see moving forward are parking, that there will be sufficient parking for what he's proposing. And I can see that he's, has a parking lot there, but I think I counted really quickly maybe like 25 or 30 spots out of the 100 or so that's needed. I didn't count the ones along the road, so I'm sure Matt did that for me. But yeah, I would consider this high density. There's no sidewalks in between there. I mean, he's adding these like sidewalks in between the buildings, and when we originally proposed it, it was just one building after another.
Gotcha.
Thank
you very much. Yep. Thank you. Okay. Susan Clark.
Hi. I was actually here for the other proposal, number 6, so the battery part.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. But y'all answered and asked all my questions, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, time out. You came all the way down. So,
I
your
had
thoughts
safety
on this
concerns.
proposed
Well,
application?
I'm glad y'all didn't agreed to pass it. I had a lot of safety concerns. So I live in the neighborhood across the street. I live on Tambark Court, over by Cottonwood Creek Elementary School.
Well, my apologies that I didn't see your item there for the previous item, but I'm asking you about this application.
this
Your thoughts
application.
on this application, since you're up at the podium.
Oh, okay. Well, I did have a question on the residential. Would that be, would they buy it? Would they rent it? How would that work?
It would probably be, each
I
lot
mean-
would be sold, and there'd be an individual owner, and they would,
And then the owners, the new owners
Oh,
would have to
Could be
follow
rented.
all of
We'll
your
let them- we'll
rules
let
or
them
the
answer on
city
that.
rules? I mean, because that could be a lot, with restaurants and different things. So that's the question that came through my mind, is how would that be regulated?
okay.
So,
Well, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So there is someone else that signed up, but that's for another item. So, Mr. Collins, we'll wait for you then. But is there anybody else who'd like to speak for or against the proposed application?
Sorry, I was a little late. I would like to. Thank you, Chairman Haas. Appreciate it, Commission. My name's Jeff Varnell. I live at 1601 East Sandy Lake Road in Coppell. I own 3 businesses here in Coppell. Also, a 32-year resident here in town. I was a former chairman of the Coppell Chamber. The chamber used to reside in that building. It's completely deficient. Some things stay the same and some things don't. The proposal has changed. Your staff has done a great job. They continue to support this. You still have a lot of people in town that do support this. Not so many people show up that are in support. You have a lot of people show up that are not in support. But appreciate your work on this last time, and I just hope things remain the same. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on the item? Okay. With that, I will.
Sorry, is there an opportunity for me to just speak to some of the slides and, about some of the slides?
I'm going to put it to the commission. Are you all okay with letting her come down and adding a little more? Okay, just one more.
If we limit it to the.
Okay, we will limit it to 3 minutes.
Okay.
We'll come back to you, Mr.
Looking at this picture here, like I said, my shop is just to the left behind Joe Shirley's barber shop there. It seems to me that when it comes to looking at this picture, everything is cherry-picked. It's like, oh, well, we wanted this, and this works with a new plan, and oh, this works with a new plan. But what you're forgetting is it doesn't look at anything like this anymore. The Kirkland house has moved, so that's irrelevant. The deli is moved, but in your description, Mary, you said that the overhead utilities cause visual clutter. Well, they're still there 20 years later. We still have visual clutter. We've been asking for 6 years for trash cans, bike racks, and benches in Old Town. We've been asking for regular maintenance. We've been asking for everything in this master plan that should have been done in the last 20 years, and it hasn't been followed through. So when we come to referring back to it for this development, I have a problem with that. Because, as I said, it's been cherry-picked apart as to what suits this development. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak for or against the proposed application? I will give the developer last chance to add some thoughts there. I would like to say, though, that as you look at that image there, that was part of a visioning process that was back in 2002. What should Old Town be? What's the look and feel? And there was a very deliberate process. I read the plan. It's a great plan, a great process that went into it. So I would disagree that it's cherry-picked. It was a solution that was derived by many that participated in that plan process, and that was kind of the look and feel that was derived from that process. No question. Time has advanced, time has changed, things change, and there was some provisions in there about changing market conditions. Okay, Mr. Collins.
The only thing I wanted to address was the petition. Tonight, when the staff put their presentation on, the 200-foot letters. Mary, do you remember those numbers again? I think there were 17 sent out within 200 feet of the property. And out of the 17, I believe the quote was 6 or 8, one of the two, with one opposed. And so the people are speaking. I knocked on those doors. I talked to those people. And there is a lot of folks that are looking for this progressive Old Town. I understand the idea. And the petition that has been signed is an internet petition that can be signed multiple times. It's an internet petition that can be signed by people in China, Bangladesh, India. There's no telling. You can't confirm any of the signatures on the petition. And so I know that there was some misinformation given out to solicit those signatures on the petition. And several people had emailed council in the previous, after the planning and zoning, when it went to council, with their understanding that they did not understand the truth behind what was going to happen to the building. And so I can give you Eli Delamore, lives in Old Town. She was one of the very first houses built on the street that runs by George's. A little bit confused. I could go walk up to the door and knock on it, and she and I spoke about it. She was one of the people who's a friend of mine for over 15 years, and she had signed the petition until she found out what was really going on and called me. Like I said, it's never been my intent. I've been quoted as making a statement on Fox 5 News or Fox 4 News at 5 about it was never my intent to demolish the buildings. It hasn't been the intent to demolish the buildings. The intent was to move them or repurpose them. And it's stayed the same. But the only thing that gets me fired up is when people cut out an excerpt and use it to state their cause and point towards my integrity as not being honest. So I've been straightforward with you guys in every development we've brought. I heard somebody mention something about the other development, the 560 South Coppell Road. We've been trying to pour concrete to finish our fire lane and parking at the rear of that building since January. We got it poured last week. And so there's certain issues going on in the supply chain that have prevented that. Are we making every effort when we move forward with this project to see some changes in how it happens so that it is quickly done? The city, for example, does not have an ordinance about a screening wall on a construction project like this, but it's in our budget to put a temporary screening fence around it until it's to the point of occupancy. So you guys know my nature. One of the comments that we got the biggest chuckle out of on Facebook was that I planted a bunch of cheap trees on South Coppell Road. The truth is, I had to ask Matt Steer's permission to not plant a 3.5-inch caliper tree that has seasonal leaves and plant a 6-inch caliper tree that is 26 feet tall with a 10 to 12-foot canopy instead of a 12-foot tree with a 4-foot canopy. The cost was substantially different, but being a local guy, building locally in my community, having cut down a huge pecan tree that sat across from Robinson Pools, after working with engineers trying to figure out how can we save it. At the end of the day, they said it can't be saved because if you pour this concrete, it's going to kill it. And then you're going to have this big hole, and you're going to plant something else there. So we went the extra mile to make sure that we put things as right as we can make them as a developer, even though it hits our bottom line. And I don't know why anybody would think we wouldn't do the same if we were to move forward with this project. We've worked with the city planning department to come up with a project that'll work. So that's pretty much where I stand.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to close the public hearing. I'll turn it over to the commission for some deliberation, unless there's any questions by the commission of staff on the item.
I have
Good.
two questions. Mary, in terms of the letter being sent out, could we verify that?
It was sent.
It was sent, okay.
Yeah, I got verification from our secretary.
Perfect, okay. And then the second question, in terms of I think I'd asked this the last time, in terms of the parking, I know you looked at the number of parks in code. Is there any concern with the turn onto Main Street, the turn, not necessarily the radius, but the distance as you're turning in? Obviously, that's an angled park that somebody would be backing out of from Bethel. Is there any concern with that being too close to the intersection?
So those are existing parking spaces. So they're already there. The only new parking spaces would be the ones interior on lot 7X. Everything else is already existing.
Sure, and I certainly understand that. The two differences, one, that the building that's there now has a parking lot, and so you can pull into the parking lot. There wouldn't be a parking lot, on Bethel. And then two, obviously with this being a larger development, there would likely be, more traffic. And as you turn, there's, less visibility around the turn with the additional landscaping and the building. So it's really just more of as long as we've looked at sort of the calculation of the turn and the time in which you can visually see as you're turning if somebody's backing out of the angled park from a safety standpoint.
It's corner clearance, site triangle.
Exactly.
Geometrics of the curve.
Yeah,
Right.
and as long as we have and you're comfortable with it.
Right, and that's something that engineering looks through, and they've reviewed the plans, and they'll review more engineering detailed plans. And if they have some concern, I'm sure they'll address it at that time.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Discussion? Sue?
Mary, I have one more question. There was a couple comments about this petition. Has the city received a copy of the petition with 1,650 signatures on it?
I have not, no.
It was handed out at the previous meeting when we had 400, and we'll gladly provide every single name and their location of where they live.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? All right.
Okay. Mary, have you looked at any other alternatives for this site?
Okay, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Any
but,
other developer present any potential development for this in the last decade?
Not that no. No.
Has this property been for sale for a significant period of time?
I'll leave that to Mr. Chaddick, who's here to answer that question. If you want to come down to the podium. Essentially, tonight, you have to look at what is being presented and what has been submitted, not speculation on what could be.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Steve Chaddick, 509 West Bethel Road, the property owner, representing the family partnership. And you're asking if there's been any other interest and how long it's been for sale. I've had that on LoopNet for about 5 years, more intensely for the last 3.5 years, where there have been pictures and other things. I've not been contacted by any of the local people who had interest in this building or have interest now, other than since the development has come forward. And the only two, I could say, qualifying individuals who were interested in the property that came to me and actually made an offer were both churches. So would have taken away revenue and tax money from At one point, we were interested in one of them because they actually had a cash offer, but it was substantially lower, and they were asking us to look into some sort of tax deferment and giving back to them as a tax-free entity. So that was something we really didn't want to do, and that's about really it. I've had a couple of tire kickers here in Coppell who have said they've had interest, but it's more for investment property, and they wanted, I think, the property, if it was all rented out and finalized. The property itself next door that the chamber used to work in, we had an agreement with Kate Shima, who would utilize that on occasion for some parties, things like that, art parties and things like that, while we decided what we wanted to do, because it did need some extensive renovation. It was going to be businesses, which is what had the renovations that had originally been done to that building. And when we raised the canted floor from the church and made it a full level floor, so it would have needed more work. And the air conditioning system's at its end point. I mean, it still works, but it's since '93 that was put in, so it's at its very end. So there were a lot of cost prohibitive things that we were looking at. And my mother moved out of her property, and we've used that kind of for storage. So that's where that's at. But no, we have not had really any kind of serious interest before Chris. So,
did he answer your question? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Sure. So I've been advised by our city attorney that I close the public hearing, so we will not ask any more questions, but thank you very much for that follow-up there. So, final deliberation on this. I'm going to start on the left side. Cindy?
No comments.
Okay. Jim? Ed?
Just a few comments. I think and I can't remember who mentioned this, but in terms of the original plan with either bike racks, benches, utilities, and so forth, I think that's a fair point to look back to see if there's things we committed to as a city that weren't installed, not as a condition of this by any means, but as just as a general comment. And then in terms of the development, one, we've certainly seen this before. Staff certainly supports, and it seems consistent with the vision. My concern with sort of the different changes in the use is that this will be we're leading toward the highest and best use of the property. Because I think the concern in my mind is if the last thing we want is to force a use that no one wants and have vacant buildings, and that's a bit of the worst case scenario. So I'm trusting the city and the developer that's obviously thinking through that from a highest and best use standpoint. And then from a historic building standpoint, I think I mentioned this in in the first meeting, that it's definitely a relevant issue. That being said, it's anyone has the ability to go and to invest the money to move the buildings, and so it's not really incumbent on the city to do that. I don't think I was as explicit the first time, but I do think as a community, if it's that important to certain individuals or segments, then typically those in other situations, those folks are the ones that raise money and to move the building. And so I think it's important to mention that from just from an accountability standpoint in terms of what's asked of the city, and then I think from an Old Town standpoint, from a vibrancy standpoint, this seems to be consistent with the generating more traffic and so forth. So I was in support of it last session, and I've been in support of it in this session.
Sue?
I would like to echo those comments. We're here to look at land use in the PD, and and this is the highest and best use that's been put before us for a plan, and I would be in support of it.
Okay, Glenn?
Well, I've been sitting on this commission since '07, and this is the first time this land has come up to the commission. It's been for sale for a long time. A lot of people have looked at what can be done over there. I'm sorry that some buildings may not be movable because there's no place to move them to that will be cost effective. The city really doesn't own the senior center. It runs the building. It leases the land from the city of Dallas, but that lease will ultimately run out, and when it does, the city will have to comply with the lease. I cannot conceive of the city of Dallas wanting any of these buildings on its land. So unless somebody says, I've got a place to move it to and I've got the money to move it, it's a non-starter. This may not be the perfect development for the front of Old Town, but it's a whole lot better than not having anything. And the 2-story, 1-story, I don't think is going to matter very much because the design of this project is pretty consistent with the rest of Old Town. And there are a ton of people who live in Old Town who have residences and houses, and they're looking for something to happen. And this is something that can happen that is good, that will be paid for by private money, by a private investor and developer, and requires no action by the city other than to approve or disapprove the zoning. The zoning for this tract is exactly where it is. And this works with the zoning for the master plan for Old Town Coppell. Is it perfect within the whole area of historical buildings? No. But I don't see anybody wanting another historical building or willing to pay for it. And every time I go to community meetings and say, who wants to put some money in to do something? It's deafness. We have somebody who's willing to put his development money in and has a concept that he's worked through this commission, lost, worked through council, lost, and is back with another proposal trying to make this happen. I think we're crazy if we turn it down. That's my opinion.
Thinking about the development of the Old Town, you know, when it was the Carter Crowley tract and we're out there, the kids were playing soccer and practice and all that, and what it's become now, you know, that has followed the vision of the Old Town plan. So I am happy with the way things have turned out to date. The density thing, you know, with the analysis that staff helped to provide me, gives me a little comfort that it's in line with the others, you know, so I'm still on the fence on it, but I'm with the comments here by the commission about a generally viable plan that we can move forward, an owner that's been willing to sell his property for some time and ready to move forward. And I think this go round, I think I'm in a better position to make a decision on this. I certainly appreciate that the applicant is open to working with the community on what to do with the building. I totally agree of the historic value and the nature and how it's at the core of culture within the Old Town Coppell, but I believe that the proposal that has been presented helps to take that vision that was developed some 20-odd years ago, and with a little bit of market thought to it, that it's kind of time to move forward. So I'm ready to make a decision on this. So is there a motion by the commission?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that item 7, Main Street, Old Town, PD-250R28-H, Main Street, Old Town, a zoning change request from H Historic to PD-250R28-H, Plan Development 250 Revision 28 Historic. Be approved as submitted, subject to the staff conditions in connection with this case.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Portman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Marr. Cammie, would you call the roll, please?
Please respond by saying aye or nay as I call your name. Commissioner Blankenship.
Aye.
Commissioner Guerra.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Portman.
Aye.
Chairman Haas.
Aye.
Commissioner Mauer.
Aye.
Commissioner Walker.
Aye.
and Commissioner Bishop.
Aye.
All approved, none opposed, motion carries.
Okay, thank you for your commitment to your vision of Coppell, the folks that have come out tonight. I certainly appreciate that, and that's what really makes us who we are in Coppell, the passion for our community. So thank you for coming out tonight and sharing your time on this. We'll take a quick break before we take up the next item on the agenda. So the time is 9:01. We'll reconvene at 9:06.
Yeah.
All righty, the time is 9:07, and we're reconvening back into general session. Thank you for the quick break there. Let's see, where's my agenda here? All righty. Item 8, consider a demolition permit for 509 West Bethel Road for the demolition of existing structures on site. We have a staff presentation by Ms. Mary Perron Boswell. Mary?
All righty, let's see. So item 8 is a regular hearing, meaning there's no public hearing. And this is for consideration of a demolition permit for 509 West Bethel. Essentially, the two buildings, there's existing 2 buildings on the site. This is the parcel that we just spoke about with the last PD case. So there are 2 structures on site. According to the Historic Resource Survey, the T-shaped building was built in 1948 as a Coppell Baptist Church, replacing a building erected in 1896. The other structure, an education building, is an addition to the church that was built in 1953 and housed the kitchen, nursery, and Sunday school rooms. These buildings are not on the state or federal historic registries. Currently, the buildings are underutilized and in need of work. The owner would like to demolish them to make way for new development. There's a current proposal for the site to create 7 lots containing the 6 mixed-use buildings. So basically, the agenda item we just went over. Regardless of whether the zoning for the new development is approved, the owner would like to be able to clear the site for redevelopment, which in this case means the ability to demolish the buildings if he so chooses. In the Old Coppell Master Plan section that speaks to character-defining buildings, there's the following statement. While it is not recommended that future demolitions be prohibited for these buildings, their preservation is strongly encouraged. The author recognizes that there may be opportunities to preserve or restore buildings, and there may be other opportunities to preserve historic elements of the buildings. The developer, Chris Collins, has indicated that they would be willing to repurpose elements from the existing buildings into the new building. So staff does not have any recommendations for this request. We're not making a formal recommendation, but you will be making a recommendation to City Council this is part of the requirement of the H District. So that is the end of my presentation. The applicant is here as well. If you have any questions or for him to make a little presentation.
So Mary, I have a question. How does staff not have a recommendation? You had a recommendation on the previous one, but not this one?
We have no recommendation.
All right, so I do have a question, though.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure we're going to hear from the applicant here in a minute, but let's say if this gets approved tomorrow, he could, if he wants to, he could take a bulldozer to it and...
Well, not tomorrow. It has to go to City Council.
Sorry?
It has to go to City Council.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
But if it passed that night, the next morning, he could be out there doing business?
If she's obligated to get a permit.
Right.
To demo the building, this is an extra step.
Okay.
So you couldn't vote on it at the council meeting, and then at 8 o'clock in the morning, you'd be out there with bulldozers. You'd have to go to building permits.
Okay.
To get the required demolition. Because there may be asbestos in that building, there may be other things.
Right. There's certain things that are required of the demolition permit as well.
Okay. And I forgot what I was going to ask. Oh, there's a meeting, March 30th, the council's putting on in Old Town regarding Old Town issues, and what's going to happen? What's this meeting about?
So I don't have an agenda, but it's essentially, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, the meeting, I believe, is March 30th, 6 o'clock. Thank you. It'll be at the Senior Center. And it's to go over plans for Old Town, the whole of Old Town and the visioning for Old Town.
Based on the current plan, or is it starting a new process?
Well, it's to go over the history, and basically, I think they're going to have some people, specialists that look at retail, et cetera, to see what does Old Town look like? What kind of things do you need to be successful for certain types of? Mindy, do you want to say something? Yeah.
She hasn't been.
I mean, so Mary's correct on everything she said, but it is also a town hall meeting, so there will be round tables where the community gets to give their input to city council as well about what they'd like to see.
Regarding the vision of Old Town?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And so,
It'll be interactive.
with regards to this application, I mean, seeing that there's a meeting on the 30th, we're just recommending yay or nay to council, but I mean.
Correct. So you'll be making a recommendation, regardless of what you recommend. It'll have to go to city council. It's scheduled to go to city council with the other agenda items that we have on April 11th. So this meeting will happen before then.
Okay. Questions of staff? Okay. Is the applicant here to discuss the item?
I am. So here we are. One of the PD conditions for the plan development that was just approved by you guys was that we cannot replat. The replat was approved in November. And so it can't be filed until the buildings are removed because the buildings overlap property lines. So the process of getting the demolition permit in this particular case, any building in Old Town, this is coming from Steve. The demolition permit is issued by Coppell Building Inspection Department. So Steve and I sat down and talked about what this looks like. And so the very first thing is approval by city council to take the buildings down.
Or relocate them? Or whatever.
The relocation is, this is just strictly on the application for the demolition permit. For it to get to city council, you have to make a recommendation to city council. Then city council is going to vote on this again. The purpose of the meeting that was originally scheduled in February, I think in February there was a 5th Tuesday, and so they were going to have a work session. The city council meeting where this PD, the first go-around, was presented, ran till 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. The opposition that was here when we came through was there at an even higher level. And council seemed to be hung up on one simple thing, and that was the
I think we're just here to talk about the demolition.
So the demolition
Let's
permit.
move
So the
forward.
demolition permit, when council approves it, should council approve it, will then require an asbestos inspection, which obviously we're not paying for yet. Why would we pay for one to not get to use it? Then before the building, upon that, the cities will make a recommendation for asbestos remediation of any hot areas in the building. And then after the hot areas are removed, then the city would approve the building demolition permit. Insurances are verified, all the special steps we have to take, utilities disconnected, removed, et cetera, and then the buildings would come down. Obviously, our purpose in repurposing materials would take place after the demolition permit was issued, because we can't start taking it apart until they say we can. And then, so this whole process, if city council approved this on April 11th, we're probably not looking till June or July before any action could be taken between the process that we have to go through, lining up the contractors, the asbestos remediation. So it gives a lot of opportunity for anyone that wants to come up with another solution, to come up with another solution before they're demoed. However, we don't want to wait until April and start this process over again, and it be September before we can do anything. Because like I said earlier, time kills deals.
Okay.
So.
Anything else you'd like to add, since staff has no recommendation on this?
I would really ask that you guys make a recommendation to council to move forward with the permit. I think by the time this gets to council on the 11th, they have already had a substantial amount of time to think out. They've heard the other options that have been presented, and I believe by the time they have their meeting on March 30th, they will be able to make a very clear decision whether it's time for the buildings to go or not. So I would appreciate the motion to move forward with a demolition permit.
Any questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you much.
Thank you.
Deliberation by the commission?
I mean, I kind of think we're at a point, having voted in favor of the development, I certainly feel compelled to vote in favor of the demolition. We can't build the development on top of the old buildings, so that we got to do something with them. You know, there's been ample time for people to come forward to, raise the money, to relocate them, to buy the property, to relocate them to. I don't agree with the city taxpayers funding all that personally, but, I'm a little concerned about the backdrop in terms of the economic environment we're dealing in right now. I mean, we've just had one of the largest bank failures in the history of mankind. So I'd like to see the development completed. I'd like to see sales tax start to get collected out of there. I'd like to see some property tax collected out of there. And I think we should proceed with all due haste to approve the demolition permit and let this go forward.
Second.
That was not a motion. That was commentary. Sue?
I think I'm in direct opposition to this demolition permit. There's a reason demolition permits in Old Town Coppell come to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that is all of the discussion that came before about the buildings and preservation. That had nothing to do with the PD that was before us. I voted for the PD because it's the highest and best use for the property. The demolition permit's a little bit different. I'm not in support of taking down old buildings and demoing the old buildings and issuing a demolition permit without, this is a different option. I mean, this is a different request. Zoning is zoning, but a demolition permit, I would be adamantly opposed to it.
Ed?
So I agree with Commissioner Walker in terms of it feels odd to approve the last request and not approve this. And I think from there's been plenty of time for anybody that wants to save those buildings or relocate them to do that. And it sounds like there would be more time in the future to do that. So, yeah, I fully support moving forward on this.
Okay. Commissioner Guerra, any comments out there in the virtual world?
I don't have anything else to add, but I do support it too. Thank you.
Okay. Cindy?
Thanks. Yeah, I also support this and echo what my fellow commissioners have said, Commissioner Walker and Ted.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to lie. I am falling on Sue's side on this. I mean, it is a different application, and it's kind of the core of Old Town, kind of what we heard in the previous application, but that was a land use consideration. Here we are now, the real deal, and thank you to the applicant for reclamation. You're going to use parts from the building. That I very much appreciate that. I guess there's just some heartfelt strings here, and that's about it. That's all it is. So I'll have a decision here in a moment when we make a decision here. But kind of a toughie here for Commissioner Haas. Okay. Any other comments, or is there a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to move to approve the consideration of the demolition permit for 509 West Bethel Road.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Marr. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Marr and a second by Commissioner Portman. Cammie, would you call the roll, please?
Please respond by saying aye or nay as I call your name. Commissioner Blankenship.
Aye.
Commissioner Guerra.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Portman.
Aye.
Chairman Haas.
Nay.
Commissioner Mauer.
Aye.
Commissioner Walker.
Aye.
And Commissioner Bishop.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 9 is a public hearing to consider text change and definition amendments to the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 12, Article 30S, or special use permits, defining and establishing special use permit requirements for lodging houses known as short-term rentals, STRs, bed and breakfasts, boarding homes, hostels, vacation homes, and corporate housing within within districts SF7, SF9, SF12, SF18, SF-ED, and historic districts. We have staff presentation by Ms. Mary Braun Boswell. Mary?
All right, good evening, Commissioners. What's before you this evening is to consider text change and definition amendments to the Code of Ordinance, Chapter 12, Article 30, Special Use Permits, defining and establishing special use permit regulations or requirements for lodging houses, which will include short-term rentals, STRs, bed and breakfasts, boarding homes, hostels, vacation homes, and corporate housing within the following single-family residential districts and H district. So the special use permit section of the ordinance addresses uses that are in general conformance with the master plan of the city and containing such requirements and safeguards as necessary to protect adjoining property. A special use permit is an additional use that may be allowed on a case-by-case basis and is in addition to the basic zoning classification of the property. These requests require an affirmative vote by City Council after a public hearing and proper notice and after recommendations for the Planning and Zoning Commission. The proposed amendment is to establish special use permit requirements for lodging houses. Lodging houses and STRs are new additions to the SUP section of the zoning ordinance. Currently, STRs exist as its own ordinance outside of the zoning ordinance. The first short-term rental ordinance was passed by City Council on June 12, 2018. At that time, the ordinance was approved. Staff was still learning about short-term rentals and knew that the ordinance would need to be reviewed at the end of 2019 to see if changes were needed. Subsequently, it's been updated, as you can tell on the screen here, December of 2019, January of 2021, 22, April of 22, and December of 2022. Now, the December changes included they approved an ordinance that provides homeowners with 2 options to use their homes on short-term rental properties. And essentially it added definitions to include pools, garages, and outdoor structures, accessory structures, as part of the STR definition. That's bright. So essentially, we would be adding a new section to the SUP's section. This would be at the end. So section 20-30-19 is what we're proposing. Essentially, it will read, no person shall advertise, offer to rent, lease, sublease, license or sublicense, or offer the same, a single-family residential property within the city as a lodging house unless a special use permit is approved and in accordance with this article. A lodging house is required to pay hotel occupancy taxes to the city. A special use permit for a lodging house may be approved only when there is a finding and determination by the City Council that the lodging house and proposed is compatible and consistent with and have no adverse effect on the existing uses in the area and in compliance with special conditions approved by City Council. If a lodging house is approved, a lodging house rental permit must be obtained
and the lodging house rental requirements held therein adhered to. Such special conditions shall include and is not limited to subletting, signage, parking, outdoor usage, adjacency of housing, hours of operation, no events or parties, no commercial activity. So these are some of the stipulations that we can add with the SUP. So the proposed amendments to the special use permits or SUPs involve updating the uses allowed in certain residential districts, in particular by adding the use of a lodging house. So a lodging house would be defined as the rental of any single-family residence or residential structure or a portion of a single-family residence or residential structure, including but not limited to pools, garages, and outdoor accessory structures for a period of less than 30 days. The term includes but is not limited to a bed and breakfast, a boarding home or hostel, a vacation home, a short-term rental, or corporate housing. The term does not include a unit that is used for a non-residential purpose, including an educational, retail, restaurant, banquet space, or event center purpose, or other commercial purposes and other similar use. A hotel, residence hotel, a place of residence used as a licensed healthcare or assisted living facility licensed by the state, a parsonage on the premise of a church, mosque, or synagogue, or a commercial storage facility. And so these uses would be limited to the following zoning districts with an SUP. So SFED, SF18, SF12, SF9, SF7, and the historic district when part of a PD for single-family residential development or mixed-use development, and shall not include live-work units. These residential districts were chosen because they are single-family detached units and not attached. This provides the neighbors some separation from the proposed uses and transient nature of the lodging house use. The mixed-use developments provide a separation of uses from the ground floor to the upper floors. STRs and regulations surrounding STRs have evolved, and adding them to the SUP process is one more step in that evolution. The ordinance has been designed to provide a balance between meeting the desires of owner-occupants to share their homes on an intermittent basis and providing protection for the neighboring properties. The proposed changes are a continuation of that balance. The SUP process would allow for more public involvement. It requires notification of property owners within 200 feet of the property in question, a courtesy notice for property owners within 800 feet of the property in question, and a public hearing at the P&Z and City Council meeting. So currently, there is no public say. Currently, property owners within 200 feet are notified after the STR is already approved. So this would provide them with the opportunity to come forward, such as a meeting like tonight, and have their say. So staff is recommending approval of the special use permit ordinance text amendments. That is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. We have our city attorney and other staff here to help me out.
Careful, you might get a lot of questions. I think this is a great start, because I think it's excellent for preserving our residential districts. So I got to believe that there's been issues already in the past that have pushed this to the forefront, and so I'm glad that we're taking a look at this. We had a lot of questions in our pre-session, so we'll probably need to go through and maybe either revisit those or tackle those unless you feel comfortable with what the answers we got. But one question I had was, it creates another layer for the public to weigh in, or the affected properties. in close proximity to the application. So would it be as if just one person denies it, or it still goes through a decision-making through the P&Z and then ultimately through council, but I guess
Correct.
case-by-case basis, so that's all good. Okay. Has there been any considerations about capping the number of STRs that might be allowable within the city, putting it like a limit, or do we need to leave it open because it's free enterprise, but we'll consider it, but it goes through a formal listening process?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we could put a cap on it.
Well, the reason I ask that is we're working with the city, and it's a vacation community, beach town, Port Aransas, and they're dying because of STRs. It's overrunning the community, and there's just a negative impact across the board to them. Fredericksburg's struggling. They have so many of those that it's just a negative impact to workers and all that. But anyway, that's why I'm asking that.
Yeah, so one of the things that would make more sense for us is to look at separation. In other words, you could have only one every 1,300 square feet or something, so we don't turn a whole block or a part of our town into STRs. It's what you're referring to. I've looked at Fredericksburg's ordinance. It's very good, but they've got a bigger problem than we do.
Yeah.
And so does Port Aransas, or any of the coastal cities are going to have a huge problem with this. In some other states, they addressed it by having a tier system. The closer you are to the water, the more they allow. As you get into the interior of the city, the more local they're prohibiting it. So that may be one of the things that we could look at if we had a problem in one point in town. But we've looked at other alternatives. The reason that we've requested the SUP is to do the balancing, as Mary said, but also it gives you the opportunity to tailor regulations to meet the requirements of the citizens and the property owner, so that we could strike those balances as we do it on a case-by-case basis. I'll go ahead and address the issue just for you about banning them. It's received some unfavorable court rulings to totally have a prohibition of banning them. There is a current piece of legislation that's been introduced at the legislature regarding restricting the city's ability to regulate STRs in particular. So we thought that instead of, and the council's indicated to us they wanted to bring this back. I've talked to them about this several times, and this is how they kind of landed on what they thought was appropriate for our community. I know there's City of Dallas, City of Fort Worth, City of Plano are gotten more aggressive. The council has not instructed me to get more aggressive. So this is why we kind of landed on this balancing thing and do it on a case-by-case basis. So I just give that to you just so you can discuss it more, but you're the policymaker, so.
Okay. Thank you for that. Questions of staff by the commission? Glenn?
Mary?
Oh, I did have one.
This current proposal, can it be amended and tightened up in the future if further restrictions are desired?
For sure.
Thank you.
Sue?
Okay, I have a series of questions. So if this were to pass, currently which department in the city reviews the current cases when a permit?
Community development.
Community development. And so would somebody from community development be at our P&Z meetings to kind of walk us through like staff is for all of the other zoning items? Or does that fall to the planning department?
It will probably fall on planning for the majority, but like our assistant director is here this evening, and he deals with the majority of the STRs currently.
Okay, and then my next question is, I guess I don't have a clear understanding of where, we're changing the text, but by adding the 12-30-19, defining those lodges houses, is that what brings this into outside of the zoning ordinance and brings it into the zoning ordinance?
Correct.
Okay, and then where in this verbiage change does it say or state that the uses are limited to the following zoning districts? know, it's
So,
in the write-up, but I didn't see it in the,
so there was, part of your package. You should have received like a red line version of the SUP. And so when you go through the red line version, so this deals specifically with just the special use permit section of the ordinance. And so like in the SFED, SF18, et cetera, we added lodging houses as a use within those zoning districts that require an SUP. And so lodging houses incorporates, like we said, bed and breakfast, the hostels, vacation house, corporate housing, and STRs. So that's what brings it into, by adopting this, it brings it into the zoning ordinance and in the SUP section. And so what we'll do from here is, if it gets passed, essentially this says you have to get an SUP, but then they'll still have to get an STR permit or a lodging house permit outside of, the zoning. That'll be one of the requirements, is that they have to get a permit. And most of the other regulations that talk to, you need a, what do you call it? Fire extinguisher. I'm losing my train of thought here. All the other requirements that fall under, health and safety issues fall under that permit requirement. So we'll have specific things that fall under the SUP, and then we'll have other health and safety issues that, that they'll have to cover as well.
but where in the verbiage or the text change does it state that it's limited, the uses are limited to certain zoning districts?
Because they're listed in the zoning category.
Well, so is commercial use, but it,
No,
I guess
Yeah.
I'm missing, I'm not a lawyer, so please help me out here. That's everybody else on
so
the board.
in the SUP section, under like SFED, we added, number 5, we added lodging houses.
Got it, okay. Now I'm following you, I think.
Okay. So under the various single-family residential districts that we want to allow it, we've added that use, lodging house, which incorporates all the other, that's like the big heading, right? And then the subheading is the bed and breakfast, the hostel, the corporate housing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Ed?
Just a couple questions. One, I guess with a SUP, is there a sign placed on the property similar to a zoning change?
No.
There's not.
Huh? Do you guys do it for the SCR?
Yeah, there will be zoning changes.
Okay, I apologize.
It's okay. And then lodging, I think we covered this in the pre-session. Lodging house is a technical definition.
Yeah, I looked at trying to figure out, instead of just calling STRs and this and that, I tried to just do a definition, called them lodging houses, because each one of those are short-term rental products.
Right.
And so I tried to give it a generic name and then list them all in the definitions, because it makes writing the ordinance and the application a lot easier.
Okay, perfect. And then from the single-family zoning categories and multifamily like SF18, are there any that are not listed there that are currently in Coppell?
Do you mean?
Single-family detached.
Yeah, single-family. And I guess my question is, I'm sure we didn't miss any, but are there any single-family zoned areas that are not included in this?
So when we looked at this, because there's other residential zoning categories like townhouse 1, townhouse 2, multifamily, et cetera.
Right.
So we decided to exclude those because really it was more of an adjacency issue. So for
the categories that I mentioned, like the SF7,
Right.
line, et cetera, those are single-family detached product, whereas the townhouse could be attached or detached. And so we wanted to allow for, you know, the extra little buffer between, so you wouldn't be like right wall on wall with someone who has an STR. So it provides some extra buffering. So we
Right.
did exclude certain residential categories, yes.
But aren't some townhomes ownership, and they may not want to have someone on the other side of that wall?
Well, that's why we didn't include townhouse.
Oh, I'm sorry, excluded. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, that's why we excluded them. We tried to allow for as much buffering as we could, and there are some zone townhouses that are single-family detached, but we didn't want to, we wanted to be clear-cut. It's like, if you're zone townhouse, you're out.
Okay, gotcha.
So they, I guess said differently, they would be required a SUP or they would not be?
So if you're not in the SF, ED 7, 9, those categories that I listed, you cannot apply for an SUP for an STR.
Ah, perfect, okay. No, I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
I just had one.
Sure.
So on page 2, 3 of your memo, you say the term does not include, and there's a list of items, but those are addressed and handled elsewhere, right? That doesn't mean that it just, like, it doesn't mean that you could have a
Right, so the
licensed healthcare facility in
Right.
the middle of a neighborhood.
Yeah, it's just not covered here. They
Right,
have to
but it's covered
qualify.
elsewhere.
Yeah, for living, licensed healthcare by state law are allowed anywhere, as long as the state licenses them. If you don't have a license from the state, then you can't have one, you can't have one here.
and the idea being that these are short-term, meaning 30 days or less.
Right.
Whereas, you know, other things that we said that does not include, like a hotel, residence hotel, those are commercial properties already by zoning and require an SUP anyway. So the idea was that because they're in a residential area, we put them as under the residential zoning, and we listed other things that would fall under that, like maybe corporate housing, maybe a vacation home, maybe, you know, bed and breakfast. So we kind of grouped all the residential kind of items together.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Rahil may have.
No, I just wanted to know if you had anything. I just thought I'd get you down here and ask. Didn't want to have to wait.
Any other questions of staff by the commission? Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody who'd like to speak for or against the proposed amendments? Yes, sir. Oh, we got two folks, all right.
You go first.
So my name is Chris Collins. I live at 564 South Coppell Road, Coppell, Texas. And I would encourage you guys to stop this. The mention of someone renting their home on a short-term basis, an evolution that we've seen in my real estate business, watching and observing, is investment groups being built for the sole purpose of buying these homes and setting them up as single-family home rentals, short-term rentals. In my development side of my business, I know several developments that have raised millions of dollars to purchase homes and run them as short-term rentals. I personally think it's great somewhere else, but not in the town that I live in. Don't want it in my backyard. I have seen certain communities that have gone to rental, and we know that when you end up with an entire neighborhood that has been rented out as the properties have turned over, there's just a certain element that you have lost control of when you have owner-occupant homes. And so I strongly encourage moving forward with something along these lines.
Okay, very good. Thank you much.
Jeff Barnell, 1601 East Sandy Lake Road. You guys got it wrong this time, and the city of Coppell has it wrong with short-term rental. Short-term rentals are just under the ordinance, just like any other rental. We have code compliance that can take care of issues. We've got 1.6 million realtors United States wide, and the realtors back short-term rentals. Carrollton is a city that has it right. We worked with the city of Carrollton on their ordinance. I would encourage you to look at that ordinance and see. Hager's got it wrong. You are aggressive in your approach to this. Not allowing townhomes is a ban. That's the reason we're working with the state legislature to work on this issue. This is a huge issue for us of private property rights, and you have it wrong. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on the item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any discussion by the commission?
I just have a couple things.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah, I respectfully have to disagree with Mr. Varnell, but I think these things are pretty much just the death knell of a community over time. You look at the argument, I can do whatever I want to do with my property. Well, not if it's in a residential zoned area. You can't. You can't run any number of types of businesses out of it. You can't set up a coal forge and start a metallurgy operation. You can't run a large dog boarding operation. There's all sorts of things you can't do because it's a home. It's where we want to encourage people to live and raise their families or be empty nesters like my wife and I or whatever, but it's a community. And what we're seeing is that it's not just, somebody that's renting their house for a couple of weekends. Blackstone is involved in this very deeply. They're investing millions of dollars all over the country buying up homes that are on Airbnb or VRBO, and they're aggregating all this under different LLCs and other corporate special purpose vehicles. And you have huge corporate aggregators otherwise, investors that you can go on to Airbnb and see that some of those people have 40, 50 properties that they're offering in different states. So what does that do? Well, when I was on economic development, we had brilliant staff liaison in Mindy Hurley, and it was a big deal. We were competing with Addison and Carrollton and Farmers Branch and Flower Mound for all these relocations of businesses and corporations. And our proximity to DFW was the one thing that gave us a real commercial edge over Addison and some of these other communities, and attracting Natera and AAA and some of these other companies to our community. And that was important to diversify our tax base. If we start allowing this encroachment of short-term rentals with respect to our residential communities, our proximity to DFW would be the worst possible thing that we could have, because we'll have corporate housing, just in spades. And the problem with that, of course, is that you don't have anyone that cares in the corporate housing or the short-term rentals about National Night Out. You don't have anybody that cares about the school district or the bond package that's necessary to patch roofs and replace HVAC systems that are 5 years past their life cycle. You don't have any interest at all in the community. You wouldn't have corporate aggregators or corporate interests that own short-term rentals showing up to protest or care about Old Town. They wouldn't be here at all because they don't care about what we're doing in this town. So you're divesting any genuine interest in your community out of the community and bringing in people that have no interest in your community into the community, absent the fact that they can rent it for a weekend, for a cowboy weekend, for a party, and, if the neighbors don't like the noise, and they can complain and the police will go out there, but that's all usually after the fact. The fact is that the quality of life of the people that own the homes, that are our taxpayers, that live in those homes, that care about the school district, that want to raise their families here, are the ones that are terrorized. And so I just think, it's a horrible development to allow. I don't think we're aggressive enough, but I do recognize the balance that Mr. Hager and others are trying to strike. It doesn't make sense to spend a lot of money in attorney's fees litigating a losing position, and I get that. But I would urge the city council to be as aggressive as possible, recognizing that we are, at the end of the day, a residential community. And the most important thing we have in this town is the residents and the people that live in our homes and the kids that go to our schools and the small businesses that support them. And so, for that reason, I'm as opposed as I can be to these things. They're a fungus, and once they start growing, it's hard to kill them.
I will second that. I mean, for all those reasons, land values, quality of life, et cetera, all those things. But, you know, what, 20 years ago, that's what we were as Coppell. You know, people came in, they were with companies, then they left. We, as a community, worked very hard to get out of that. Coppell for a lifetime. For that reason, we don't need these kinds of things coming in, or at least we need to control it so it doesn't have a negative impact on what we're trying to do. So I totally agree with you there, Jim. Any other thoughts by the commission? Ed?
I mean, I think it's a generally good approach. I think there's probably a place for it in some form. You know, I don't know enough about it, and you know where and when. So I think this is a good approach to make sure that we can monitor it and determine what is appropriate and where and so forth. So.
Okay. Any final discussion? Is there a motion by the commission?
I'll move, but can we get the description up? I don't have the number. I can find it somewhere. Oh.
Number 9.
Commissioner Haas, I move that we approve item 9 on the agenda, considering the text change in definition amendments to the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 12, Article 30, as for special use permits, defining and establishing special use permit requirements for lodging houses, short-term rentals, STRs, bed and breakfasts, boarding homes, hostels, vacation homes, and corporate housing within the SF7, SF9, SF12, SF18, SFED, and H districts.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Walker. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Bishop. Cammie, would you call the roll, please?
Please respond by saying aye or nay as I call your name. Commissioner Blankenship.
Aye.
Commissioner Guerra.
Aye.
Vice Chair Portman.
Aye.
Chairman Haas.
Aye.
Commissioner Maurer.
Aye.
Commissioner Walker.
Aye.
And Commissioner Bishop.
Aye.
All approved, none opposed, motion carries.
Okay, very good. Thank you much. Item 10 is update on council actions. We generally reviewed that in pre-session. Mary, is there anything to add to that?
No, sir, the meeting was, there's only one meeting this month, and it's the 28th. Popeyes and Starbucks will be going on that agenda.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you to the commission. We had some toughies tonight. Don't know that we've ever had this kind of split on any number of items like this in the 15 years that I've been doing this. So good work tonight. It's 9:55, and with that, I'll adjourn our meeting.
But we ended on a unified note.
We sure did.